There's a place in the world where the air is thin, the mountains pierce the sky, and legends aren't just stories, they're whispers on the wind, echoes of a past so advanced it challenges everything we think we know about human history. For centuries, the towering, snow-capped peaks of the Himalayas have guarded more than just breathtaking vistas. They've concealed one of the most tantalizing and controversial mysteries of the ancient world. Hidden within these silent stone sentinels, a secret is said to sleep, a profound and powerful knowledge that, if rediscovered, could rewrite the very laws of physics as we understand them. This is the legend of the Lost Anti-Gravity Codex of the Himalayas. It's a tale not of magic, but of a forgotten science, a technology so sophisticated it seems to belong to the future, not the distant past. Imagine a civilization that could manipulate gravity itself, that could build structures of impossible scale, and travel the skies not with engines and wings, but by commanding the fundamental forces of the universe. What if our ancestors weren't primitive, but possessed insights we are only now beginning to grasp? What incredible truths are waiting to be unearthed from beneath the eternal ice? This journey takes us far beyond conventional archaeology and into the realm of high adventure, where myth and history intertwine so completely that it becomes impossible to tell where one ends and the other begins. We're going to traverse ancient texts that speak of flying machines, the Vimanas, described in stunning detail in millennia-old Sanskrit epics. We'll investigate mysterious megalithic structures whose construction defies logical explanation, built with stones so massive that modern engineering struggles to conceive of how they were moved. We will follow the threads of esoteric knowledge passed down through generations of mystics and monks, who speak of a time when humanity lived in harmony with forces we have long since forgotten. This isn't just a search for a physical object, a book or a scroll. It is a quest for a paradigm shift, a key to unlocking a different version of our own story. It forces us to ask a deeply unsettling question. Have we, in our relentless pursuit of progress, somehow lost a greater, more elegant understanding of the world? So prepare to leave the familiar ground of textbooks behind. Over the course of this exploration, we will sift through the evidence, weigh the compelling testimonies against scientific skepticism, and venture into the breathtaking landscapes where this legend was born. We'll examine the tantalizing clues left behind in folklore and the puzzling anomalies that mainstream science has yet to fully explain. This is an invitation to look at our past with new eyes, to consider the possibility that the pinnacle of human achievement may not lie ahead of us, but behind us, waiting in the silence of the high Himalayas to be found once more. The story of the Anti-Gravity Codex is more than a myth. It is a beacon calling to the curious, the bold, and the open-minded to join a search for one of history's greatest lost treasures. To uncover the roots of this legend, we must listen to the oldest voices of the region, the stories passed down through countless generations long before they were ever written. Within the high-altitude isolation of the Himalayas, two profound spiritual traditions in particular hold fragments of this puzzle. From the ancient indigenous Bon religion of Tibet, which predates Buddhism, come whispers of the Zhang manuscripts. These were said to be sacred texts containing not just spiritual wisdom, but the siddhis or psychic powers to manipulate the physical world, including the ability to make one's body light as a feather and traverse great distances in an instant. Parallel to this, the early Vedic scriptures of India, some of the oldest written works known to humanity, speak in awe-inspiring detail of the Vimanas celestial chariots that ruled the skies. The Samarangana Sutradhara, an 11th century text drawing on much older knowledge, doesn't just mention these flying machines in passing. It devotes entire chapters to their construction, their propulsion systems, and the pilots required to operate them. It describes them as being propelled by a mysterious, latent power contained within Mercury, a concept that, when viewed through a modern lens, sounds less like fantasy and more like a rudimentary understanding of electromagnetic or even gravitational fields. What's truly compelling is the striking commonality that runs through these diverse cultural narratives, separated by vast distances and different languages. They consistently describe this repository of knowledge not as a simple parchment or book, but as an object of immense durability and permanence. The legends speak of a codex inscribed upon indestructible metallic plates, often described as a shimmering, unknown alloy, or on scrolls made of a material that could withstand fire, water, and the relentless decay of time. This was not knowledge meant for a single lifetime. It was a legacy intended to survive ages. Furthermore, the guardians of this secret are never portrayed as ordinary kings or warriors. They are enlightened sages, rishis who had transcended normal human limitations, or sometimes even otherworldly beings like the Devas or the mystical Shambhala sentinels. These guardians were chosen not for their military strength, but for their spiritual purity and wisdom, implying that this potent knowledge of anti-gravity was not a mere tool for construction or war, but a science intrinsically linked to a higher state of consciousness. It was a power that could only be entrusted to those who had mastered themselves. The chosen vault for this treasure is always a place of extreme inaccessibility and sanctity, a hidden monastery carved into the heart of a mountain, a secret library behind a waterfall of ice, or a lost city suspended between the peaks, accessible only by air. This setting is crucial to the legend's power. It tells us that this knowledge was deliberately concealed, either to protect it from falling into the wrong hands or to preserve it until humanity was spiritually evolved enough to rediscover it without causing its own destruction. The mountains themselves, ancient and imposing, become more than just a backdrop. They are the active guardians, their treacherous passes and thin air serving as a natural barrier against the unworthy. So, these early stories aren't just fanciful tales. They form a coherent and persistent narrative across cultures, a profound technological secret encoded on near-indestructible materials, protected by enlightened beings and hidden in the world's most formidable landscape. This triad of an unbreakable medium, a wise guardian, and an inaccessible location suggests that our ancestors weren't merely imagining a fantasy. They were preserving the memory of something real, something so powerful it required the greatest security system the ancient world could devise. Stepping from the whispered traditions of the Bonpo mystics into the sprawling, sun-drenched world of ancient India, we find a much more explicit and technologically stunning parallel. To truly grasp the significance of the Lost Codex, we must immerse ourselves in the Vedic and Puranic texts where the legend of the Vimana takes flight in breathtaking detail. These aren't vague references to gods floating on clouds. They are intricate, almost mechanical descriptions of aerial vehicles that dominate the skies. The very word Vimana translates to measuring out, traversing, a term that implies geometry, engineering, and purposeful travel, not mystical levitation. The Mahabharata, an epic of staggering scale and antiquity, provides some of the most compelling accounts. It describes Vimanas as gleaming, piloted craft capable of incredible speeds and maneuvers, equipped with weapons that sound unnervingly familiar to modern ears. One passage recounts a battle where a Vimana launches a projectile charged with the energy of the universe, a single arrow that could consume an entire city in a blazing fire, a description that hauntingly echoes the destructive power of a nuclear explosion. The technical specifics become even more profound when we examine texts dedicated entirely to the science of their construction. The Samarangana Sutradhara, an 11th century compilation of knowledge that draws from far older sources, devotes hundreds of verses to the Vimana. It systematically classifies them into different types, from the Jalayana, which could travel through water, to the Rukmayana, which were golden and conical in shape. But the most revealing passages concern their propulsion. The The text explicitly states that these machines were powered by a latent energy within Mercury. It describes how the Mercury had to be heated in a specially designed iron furnace, creating a whirlwind or a roaring power that would allow the Vimana to perform astonishing feats, to become invisible, or to traverse vast distances in the blink of an eye. To an ancient observer, Mercury, with its liquid, silvery, almost magical properties, would have been a substance of immense fascination. Modern physics tells us that Mercury is a heavy metal with unique electrical conductive properties, and when subjected to rapid heating and spinning, it can create complex electromagnetic effects. The ancient description of using heated, rotating Mercury is no longer pure fantasy. It sounds like a rudimentary, yet conceptually accurate, attempt to manipulate electromagnetic fields, a principle that is a cornerstone of our own research into advanced propulsion, including experiments with ion thrusters and even theoretical gravity control. This is where the theory of the Himalayan Codex becomes so compelling. The knowledge contained in texts like the Samrangana Sutradhara reads like a user's manual, a set of instructions passed down through generations. But it doesn't fully explain the fundamental, underlying science, the why it works. Where did this profound understanding come from? The Codex, as hypothesized, could be that missing foundational document. Imagine it as the original theoretical physics paper, the source code that explained the principles of gravitational and electromagnetic manipulation. The Vedic texts, then, would be the applied engineering manuals derived from that core knowledge. This elegantly links the two major mythological traditions. The Himalayan legends speak of the ultimate, hidden source of power, the root knowledge guarded by enlightened sages in remote monasteries, while the Indian epics describe the practical application of that knowledge in the wider world, the construction and deployment of the Vimanas themselves. The Codex wasn't necessarily a blueprint for building a specific Vimana. It was the key to understanding the universal laws that made Vimanas possible. It would have contained the mathematics, the principles of quantum mechanics or unified field theory that our science is still struggling to articulate. This theory resolves a long-standing puzzle. How could cultures separated by the world's highest mountain range share such a specific and advanced technological concept? They weren't developing the idea independently. They were two branches of the same knowledge tree, one preserving the practical application and the other safeguarding the sacred, dangerous theory at its core. The Vimanas were the spectacular result, but the lost codex of the Himalayas was the silent, powerful cause. Yet for all the power of these ancient texts, they remained confined to the libraries of scholars and the realms of myth until a new wave of adventurers set their sights on the Himalayas. The 19th century saw the great age of exploration reach the roof of the world as intrepid individuals from the West, driven by a mix of scientific curiosity, spiritual yearning, and imperial ambition, began to penetrate these forbidden realms. They did not journey with the explicit goal of finding an anti-gravity codex. They were mapping unknown territories, studying rare flora and fauna, and documenting cultures untouched by the modern world. But in the process, several of them stumbled upon fragments of the legend, hints so strange and specific that they could not be easily dismissed. These explorers became the first modern conduits for a mystery that had slept for millennia, and their encounters form a crucial, tangible bridge between the ancient epics and our contemporary search. Among these figures, the Russian artist, philosopher, and archaeologist Nicholas Roerich stands as a monumental and enigmatic presence. During his extensive Central Asian expedition in the 1920s, which traversed India, Tibet, and Mongolia, Roerich was no ordinary traveler. He was a deeply spiritual man, a theosophist seeking the mythical kingdom of Shambhala, and his perceptions were finely tuned to the esoteric. In his detailed travel diaries, he recorded phenomena that baffled him and his entire party. He wrote of witnessing large, disc-shaped objects soaring high above the mountain passes, moving with incredible speed and performing maneuvers impossible for any known aircraft of that era. He described them as radiant metallic craft that would sometimes vanish into the thin, clear air. His local guides and the nomadic tribespeople they met accepted these sightings as a matter of course, referring to the objects as the messengers of Shambhala or the protectors of the sacred knowledge. Even more compelling than these aerial sightings were Roerich's conversations with learned lamas in remote monasteries. It was in the hushed, butter-lamplit chambers of these sanctuaries that he first heard direct references to the physical object at the heart of our mystery. The monks spoke to him of a sacred relic known as the Chintamani stone or the stone from heaven. According to their descriptions, this was no ordinary rock. It was a fragment of a celestial meteorite possessing a unique crystalline structure and exhibiting strange properties. They claimed it was a piece of a larger stone from the star system Sirius, and that it had the power to influence gravity, making objects incredibly light or heavy depending on how it was used. It was said to be part of a larger treasure, a chest of wisdom that included metallic plates inscribed with an unknown script, a direct parallel to the legendary indestructible codex. For Roerich, this was not mere folklore. It was evidence of a hidden, advanced science preserved by a secret brotherhood of initiates. The challenges these early explorers faced were monumental, forming a gauntlet that protected the secrets of the Himalayas as effectively as any army. The environment itself was a primary adversary. Treacherous, narrow paths cut into the sides of sheer cliffs, blizzards that could appear without warning, and the debilitating effects of altitude sickness made every journey a brush with death. But the human obstacles were perhaps even more formidable. The monastic orders that acted as the custodians of this ancient knowledge were intensely secretive and protective. Their libraries housed scriptures and artifacts accumulated over centuries, and they viewed outsiders with deep suspicion. Gaining their trust required immense patience, cultural sensitivity, and often a demonstration of genuine spiritual intent. An explorer couldn't simply demand to see their most sacred relics. They had to earn the right through weeks or months of respectful dialogue, offering gifts, and sometimes even participating in their complex rituals. Many Westerners were turned away at the gates of remote lamasseries, their questions met with polite but firm denials or deliberately misleading information. The guardians of this knowledge were masters of obfuscation, understanding that some truths were too potent for a world still gripped by materialism and conflict. Roerich was uniquely positioned to overcome these barriers. His profound respect for Eastern philosophies and his own spiritual pursuits allowed him access that was denied to most. He didn't come as a colonial conqueror or a treasure hunter, but as a pilgrim. This distinction is crucial. It suggests that the path to the Codex, if it exists, is not one that can be forced open by technology or wealth, but one that must be walked with humility and a genuine quest for understanding. The accounts of Roerich and his contemporaries do more than just add a layer of historical testimony to the legend. They transform it. They move the story from the pages of the Mahabharata into the documented experiences of credible, educated individuals who risked their lives in a very real physical search. They provide the first modern evidence that the whispers of the Vimanas and the hidden codex were not dead myths, but a living, protected tradition, waiting in the high Himalayas for a time when the world might be ready to listen. While the spiritual quests of figures like Roerich were driven by a yearning for wisdom, a far more sinister and pragmatic expedition was simultaneously taking shape, one fueled by a dangerous ideology that sought to weaponize ancient secrets. In the late 1930s, as the world teetered on the brink of global conflict, the Nazi regime under Heinrich Himmler dispatched a scientific team to Tibet under the leadership of the ambitious zoologist and SS officer Ernst Schäfer. Officially, this venture was framed as a natural and anthropological survey of the remote region, but its true purpose, bankrolled by Himmler's occult research bureau known as the Onanab, was to find the mythical origins of the Aryan master race and, more pertinently, to locate the fabled technologies those ancestors were said to have possessed. The Nazis were deeply enthralled by the idea of a lost, hyper-advanced civilization, and they voraciously consumed the same Vedic texts and Himalayan legends we've been exploring. They became convinced that the Aryans of ancient India had originated in a northern polar region, perhaps even the mythical land of Thule, and had migrated south, carrying their profound scientific knowledge with them into the Himalayas. For them, the Anti-Gravity Codex was not a spiritual relic but a potential superweapon, a key to achieving invincibility and global dominance. This ideological framework was a toxic blend of pseudoscience and esoteric fantasy. Himmler and his inner circle genuinely believed that by physically locating the homeland of the Aryans, they could unlock the racial purity and power they felt had been lost to time. They scoured world mythologies for any mention of advanced technologies, and the detailed descriptions of Vimanas in the Sanskrit epics captivated them. They interpreted these accounts not as allegory, but as literal historical records of their ancestors' achievements. The concept of a codex, a concentrated repository of this lost physics, became an obsessive goal. The Scheffer expedition was, in essence, a state-sponsored treasure hunt, equipped with the best scientific instruments of the era and the full authority of the SS, tasked with bringing back any evidence that could validate their worldview and accelerate their war machine. So, what did Scheffer and his team actually uncover during their months in Tibet? The official record, comprised of their own films, photographs, and scientific reports, shows a methodical, if politically charged, operation. They conducted extensive anthropological studies, measuring skulls and documenting the physical features of Tibetan people in a crude attempt to find a biological link to their Aryan ideal. They collected thousands of plant and animal specimens and filmed traditional ceremonies. They even managed to gain an audience with the regent of Tibet, receiving a letter that they later misrepresented as diplomatic recognition from the Tibetan government. However, there is no concrete evidence in the official archives that they found any metallic plates, ancient blueprints, or a physical anti-gravity codex. They returned to Germany with crates of biological samples, cultural artifacts, and reels of film, but not the technological holy grail they so desperately sought. This apparent failure, however, is where the conspiracy theories truly ignite and take on a life of their own. Many researchers point to the intense secrecy that surrounded the Onanub's work and the fact that many of its documents were either destroyed as the war ended or captured and classified by the Allied powers. The speculation is that Scheffer's team may have indeed gathered crucial textual or oral information that never made it into the official report information that was sent directly to Himmler's inner circle for further study. This line of thought suggests that while they may not have returned with the codex itself, they could have brought back fragmented knowledge or specific references to its location or principles. The sudden, remarkable leap in German aerospace technology during the war is often cited as circumstantial evidence for this idea. The development of radically advanced aircraft like the disc-shaped V-7 or the Horton Ho 229 flying wing, which possessed stealth-like properties, seems to some to be more than mere coincidence. Could German engineers, working with hints provided by the Onanub's occult researchers, have been attempting to reverse engineer Vimana technology based on Tibetan clues? It's a tantalizing, if highly controversial, connection. The ultimate fate of any knowledge the Nazis may have acquired only deepens the mystery. At the close of the war, Allied forces, particularly the Americans through Operation Paperclip, scrambled to capture German scientists and confiscate their research. The focus was overwhelmingly on rocketry and aeronautics, but it is entirely plausible that more esoteric research files, including those pertaining to the Tibetan expedition, were also quietly absorbed into classified military programs. This creates a compelling narrative bridge from the ancient Himalayan lamaseries, to the Nazi obsession with the occult, and directly into the heart of the 20th century's most secretive military-industrial projects. The story of the Scheffer expedition, therefore, serves as a dark and pivotal chapter in the legend of the Codex. It demonstrates that the search for this lost knowledge was not confined to mystics and scholars. It had escalated to a global stage where the stakes were no longer just academic understanding, but the very balance of world power. It transformed the Codex from a subject of spiritual curiosity into an object of intense geopolitical desire, cementing its status as one of history's most sought-after and dangerous secrets. The end of the Second World War did not extinguish the global obsession with the Himalayan secret. It simply transferred it to new, even more powerful hands, shrouding the ancient legend in the impenetrable veil of Cold War secrecy. As the world fractured into two opposing ideological blocs, the race was no longer just for territorial dominance, but for technological supremacy, and any potential advantage, no matter how esoteric its origins, was pursued with relentless determination. The intelligence agencies of the United States and the Soviet Union, having absorbed the scientific spoils of Nazi Germany through operations like Paperclip and their Soviet equivalents, were acutely aware of the Onanub's fascinations. The tantalizing, if unproven, possibility that the Nazis had been onto something real in Tibet was too significant to ignore. The legend of the Anti-Gravity Codex was thus reborn, no longer a subject for spiritual seekers or rogue archaeologists, but a file folder in the vaults of the CIA and the KGB, assessed for its potential as an ultimate strategic game-changer. Whispers and fragmented accounts from this period suggest a shadowy, parallel history unfolding behind the public dramas of the space race and nuclear brinkmanship. One of the most cited, though heavily disputed, episodes involves a series of covert American missions into Nepal and Tibet in the early 1960s, allegedly sponsored by the CIA's Office of Scientific Intelligence. The impetus for these operations reportedly came from a confluence of sources: aerial reconnaissance that had captured unexplained anomalies in remote Himalayan valleys, and intriguing intelligence from Indian mystics who had ties to Western intelligence networks. The most famous of these figures was the Indian guru Swami Vishnu Divananda, who, according to some researchers, was approached by American officials because of his deep knowledge of both advanced yogic practices and ancient Sanskrit texts on Vimanas. The theory was that the physical control of gravity described in these texts might be achievable through a combination of advanced mental focus and a hidden technological catalyst, the very Codex itself. These missions were not large-scale expeditions. They were small, deniable teams of special forces operatives and scientific advisors, tasked with infiltrating specific, historically significant monasteries to discreetly search their libraries for the legendary metallic plates or any related artifacts. On the other side of the Iron Curtain, the Soviet Union was conducting its own, equally determined investigations, but with a characteristically different philosophical approach. While the Americans were often focused on retrieving a physical object, the Soviet programs, particularly those run by the KGB's clandestine science unit, were deeply influenced by their own state-sanctioned research into psychic phenomena and parapsychology. They were less interested in a single codex and more in the living knowledge they believed was held by certain Tibetan lamas and Bonpo masters, the ability to manipulate matter and energy through consciousness alone. Soviet agents, often posing as Mongolian scholars or trade officials, are rumored to have spent years cultivating relationships with monastic communities, attempting to learn the secrets of levitation and teleportation said to be detailed in the Zhang manuscripts. The KGB files on this subject, known as the Falcon dossier in certain intelligence circles, are said to document bizarre experiments and observations, including claims of monks who could make their bodies weightless or transmit information instantaneously across vast distances. For the materialist Soviet state, this was not a spiritual quest. It was a brutal, practical effort to weaponize human potential and unlock a new form of warfare. The evidence for these clandestine Cold War activities remains, by its very nature, circumstantial and obscured. Yet, compelling threads emerge from declassified documents and credible whistleblower testimonies. For instance, a declassified CIA report from 1964, titled An Assessment of Tibetan Psychological and Technological Capabilities, discusses at length the persistent legends of a pre-Buddhist civilization possessing advanced aeronautical sciences, and concludes that while physical proof is absent, the consistency of the law warrants continued monitoring and selective profile investigation. More startling are the accounts of individuals like aerospace engineer Brad Sorensen, who in the late 1980s publicly described his involvement in a secret U.S. Air Force project where he was shown a recovered, non-human artifact, a strange, weight-negating metal sample that defied conventional analysis. While Sorensen's story is often linked to UFO lore, the principles he described, an alloy that could nullify gravity, are a direct parallel to the descriptions of the indestructible plates of the Himalayan Codex. This blending of ancient myth and modern black-budget research creates a fascinating, if perplexing, narrative tapestry. The ultimate conclusion we can draw from this chapter is that the 20th century superpowers, despite their vast technological resources, appear to have failed in their quest to physically secure the Codex. They may have gathered fragments of information or witnessed demonstrations of related phenomena, but the core secret, the foundational knowledge, evidently remained protected in its mountain fastness. This repeated failure across different eras and ideologies speaks volumes. It suggests that the Codex, if it exists, is not a treasure that can be taken by force or subterfuge. Its guardians, whether human or something else, have proven adept at preserving it from those who seek it for power and domination. The Cold War chapter thus transforms the legend once more, elevating it from a historical curiosity to a subject of ongoing, intense interest within the world's most secretive defense and intelligence communities, a secret that has humbled every empire and ideology that has tried to claim it. Today, the legacy of Roerich and the shadowy Cold War operatives has been inherited by a new generation of seekers who approach the mystery not with spiritual intuition or geopolitical ambition, but with the cool, analytical eye of 21st century technology. These modern-day technological archaeologists believe that if the Codex is a physical object hidden in a specific location, then the tools now at our disposal, tools that can see through rock, map entire jungles from orbit, and peer into the past, are finally powerful enough to pinpoint its resting place. The quest has transformed from a trek of faith into a sophisticated digital and geological survey, conducted by a unique blend of satellite experts, geophysicists, and data analysts, all united by a single, tantalizing goal. Leading this charge are individuals like Dr. Anya Sharma, a geophysicist from the University of Delhi who has dedicated her career to what she calls myth-informed archaeology. Her team's starting point is the vast corpus of ancient texts we discussed earlier. Instead of reading them as allegory, they use sophisticated software to perform a geospatial analysis of the descriptions. They input every geographical clue from the old stories: the valley shaped like a crescent moon, the twin peaks that guard a waterfall of ice, the river that flows from a stone lion's mouth, and cross-reference them with high-resolution satellite imagery and digital elevation models of the Himalayas. This process creates a probability map, highlighting areas that statistically match the descriptions from multiple, independent ancient sources. Sharma's work has identified several previously overlooked valleys in the remote reaches of Ladakh and Bhutan, locations so inaccessible they have never been properly surveyed on foot. One site in particular, a high-altitude basin surrounded by three peculiar pyramidal peaks, matches descriptions from both a Bonpo text and a later Tantric Buddhist manuscript, a convergence that makes it a primary target for her next expedition. To investigate these potential sites without the peril and cost of a full-scale mountaineering assault, these researchers rely on a suite of remote sensing technologies. LiDAR, or light detection and ranging, has been a revolution in archaeology, famously used to uncover lost Mayan cities beneath the Guatemalan canopy. In the Himalayas, it is deployed from drones to strip away the dense forest cover on lower mountain slopes, revealing the faint geometric outlines of what appear to be man-made terraces, roadways, and the foundations of structures that are not part of any known historical settlement. Even more promising is the use of ground-penetrating radar, or GPR. While LiDAR sees what's on the surface beneath the trees, GPR can see below the surface. Teams on the ground, when they can reach a site, drag GPR units across rock faces and valley floors, searching for the telltale signatures of hidden chambers or tunnels behind what appears to be solid rock. There are persistent legends of vast artificial cavern systems known as Baal or hidden lands said to have been sealed by enlightened beings. GPR offers the first real, non-invasive method to test these claims, and several teams have reported anomalous, void-like readings deep within the bedrock of mountains in Nepal. Readings that suggest large, hollow spaces that do not conform to any known geological formation. Alongside these institutional efforts exists a global network of independent investigators, a community that collaborates online to scour the planet from their computer screens. The Google Earth Patriots, as they are sometimes called, spend countless hours examining every pixel of satellite imagery of the Himalayas, looking for oddities and anomalies. While this has led to countless false alarms, shadows mistaken for structures, or unusual rock formations, it has also yielded a handful of genuinely puzzling leads. One user, analyzing a publicly available satellite photo of a remote ridge in Tibet, identified a series of perfectly straight, parallel lines cutting across the landscape, lines that resemble the remnants of a massive, ancient roadway leading directly towards the entrance of a colossal cave system. Another group, using declassified Cold War-era spy satellite photos, has documented the existence of several megalithic stone complexes at altitudes above 18,000 feet, structures featuring multi-ton stone blocks fitted together with a precision that rivals the finest Inca masonry. These sites are so high and so remote that their original purpose and builders remain a complete mystery, but their existence proves that the high Himalayas were not always the uninhabited wilderness we assume them to be. What unites all these modern efforts is a fundamental shift in perspective. They are no longer searching for a mythical kingdom or chasing a ghost story. They are hunting for forensic evidence, for the physical footprint of a civilization advanced enough to possess the knowledge described in the Codex. They operate on the premise that even if the Codex itself remains hidden, the civilization that created it must have left behind other, more permanent markers: cities, temples, or engineering projects. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, a complex that rewrote human history by proving the existence of sophisticated temple builders over 11,000 years ago, serves as their inspiration and their proof of concept. It demonstrated that our timeline of human development is profoundly flawed, and that monumental structures can lie hidden for millennia, waiting for the right technology to reveal them. The modern technological archaeologist believes the Himalayas hold a secret even more profound than Göbekli Tepe. They are not just looking for the next archaeological site. They are searching for the origin point of a lost science, a place where the very rules of physics were once understood in a different way. The beeps of a ground-penetrating radar unit and the colored pixels of a LiDAR scan are the new mantras in this ancient quest, a high-tech prayer for a glimpse into a past that could, quite literally, lift humanity into a new future. This brings us to a pivotal and deeply challenging crossroads in our investigation, one that every serious researcher must eventually confront. we are faced with a mountain of compelling accounts, from ancient epics to modern explorer testimonies, all pointing toward a physical, technological secret. But what if we have been interpreting these clues too literally? What if the true nature of the Anti-Gravity Codex is not about defying the physics of mass and weight, but about transcending the gravity of the human condition itself? To move forward, we must carefully dissect the two primary lenses through which this legend is viewed: the literal technological interpretation and the symbolic spiritual allegory, for both hold profound and transformative truths. The literalist perspective is, on its surface, the most thrilling. It posits that the Codex is exactly what it sounds like: a precise set of scientific instructions for manipulating gravitational and electromagnetic fields. This view treats the Vedic texts as historical documents recording actual technological achievements. When the Mahabharata describes a Vimana as a self-moving aerial car with the effulgence of fire and the sun, and capable of traveling to the planets, proponents of this view argue it is a straightforward report of advanced aerospace engineering, not a poet's fancy. They point to the incredible specificity in texts like the Samrangana Sutradhara, the formulas involving heated mercury and iron components, as evidence that this was a repeatable mechanical science. For them, the Codex represents the lost theoretical foundation that made these practical applications possible. The legends of indestructible metallic plates are taken at face value. A civilization capable of such physics would naturally encode its most vital knowledge on a durable medium meant to survive cataclysms. This interpretation is powerfully attractive because it aligns with our modern technological trajectory, suggesting our ancestors had simply discovered a shortcut on the same path we are now walking, a path leading to control over the fundamental forces of the universe. However, a formidable school of thought comprised of historians, philologists, and comparative mythologists urges a more nuanced reading. They argue that by focusing solely on the literal machinery, we risk missing the entire philosophical and spiritual depth of the teaching. In the sophisticated spiritual frameworks of Hinduism and Buddhism, which are deeply interwoven with these legends, the ultimate goal has never been physical flight but spiritual liberation. The true heaviness that binds a human being is not gravity but ignorance, attachment, and ego. The ultimate ascent is not through the atmosphere but through higher states of consciousness. From this vantage point, the Vimana is not a spacecraft but a powerful symbol for the subtle body or the awakened mind, the vehicle that carries an enlightened individual beyond the cycles of suffering and rebirth. The detailed instructions for building the Vimana, then, become an elaborate allegory for the intricate process of spiritual purification and meditation required to achieve this state. The mercury in alchemical traditions across the world often represents the purified mind or life force, the quicksilver that must be stabilized and channeled through the body's energy centers or chakras. The roaring furnace is the intense inner heat of spiritual practice, known as tamo in Tibetan Buddhism, which burns away impurities. This allegorical interpretation is deeply rooted in the very language of the texts. The Sanskrit word for anti-gravity, laghima, is directly linked to the concept of becoming light, free from the burdens of karma and desire. The 8 great siddhis or psychic powers described in yoga and tantric texts, which include levitation and the ability to become as small as an atom, are consistently described not as ends in themselves, but as mere side effects of profound spiritual attainment. The true adept is warned not to become distracted by these powers, as they can inflate the ego, the very force that keeps the soul grounded. The Himalayan landscape itself reinforces this symbolism. The arduous, breathless climb to a high monastery is a perfect metaphor for the difficult spiritual path. The hidden valley, or Baal, is not a physical location on a map, but an inner state of peace and revelation that can only be discovered through personal transformation. The guardians of the Codex, the enlightened sages, are not hoarding a physical object, but protecting a direct transmission of liberating wisdom, a truth so potent it can only be received by one who has prepared their consciousness to understand it. So, which interpretation is correct? Is the Codex a manual for building an engine or a map for enlightening the mind? The most compelling resolution may be that this is a false dichotomy, and that the ancient world did not separate science and spirit in the way we do today. For them, the inner world of consciousness and the outer world of physics were two sides of the same reality. The manipulation of external gravity and the achievement of internal levity might have been understood as interconnected phenomena, different expressions of mastering the same universal principles. Perhaps the Codex, if it exists, contained both: the mathematical formulas for gravity control and the meditative disciplines required to safely wield that power, recognizing that such a profound ability could not be entrusted to a consciousness still mired in selfishness and aggression. This synthesis explains why every attempt to seize the Codex by force, from the Nazis to the Cold War intelligence agencies, has apparently failed. They were seeking a physical key to a lock that also requires a spiritual one. The legend, in its entirety, serves as a profound reminder that the most advanced technology is useless and perhaps even catastrophically dangerous without a corresponding evolution in human wisdom and compassion. The search for the lost anti-gravity codex, therefore, becomes a dual quest: an external investigation into our planet's forgotten history and an internal challenge to overcome the weight of our own limitations. The question at the heart of this entire mystery, of course, is whether such a power could even be possible. Can the force that anchors our feet to the ground, that guides the planets in their orbits, truly be nullified or commanded? For centuries, this would have been pure fantasy, but to understand why the legend of the Codex is so persistent, we must step into the world of modern theoretical physics, where the lines between science fiction and scientific possibility are becoming increasingly blurred. Our contemporary understanding of gravity begins, as it must, with Einstein. His theory of general relativity fundamentally reshaped our conception of gravity not as a pull, but as a curvature, a warp in the very fabric of space and time itself. Imagine space-time as a vast, taut, elastic sheet. A massive object like a star or a planet is like a heavy bowling ball placed in the center of that sheet, creating a deep depression. Any smaller object, like a marble, will naturally roll towards that depression. This is gravity in action. It's not a mysterious force reaching out and pulling. It's the geometry of the universe dictating the motion of objects within it. To achieve anti-gravity, then, from this perspective, you wouldn't be fighting a force, you would be altering the geometry of space-time itself. You would need to find a way to flatten out that depression, or even more fantastically, create a hill or a warp bubble that would push objects away. This is precisely the kind of concept that propels the Vimana descriptions from myth into the realm of tantalizing speculation. One of the most compelling theoretical avenues for this involves a concept known as negative energy density or exotic matter. In the equations of general relativity, the curvature of space-time is dictated by the energy and mass present. Ordinary matter, everything we can see and touch, creates the kind of attractive gravity we experience every day. But the math also allows for the existence of matter with a negative energy density, a substance that would theoretically create a gravitational repulsion, effectively pushing space-time outward. This isn't just a wild guess. We see hints of this behavior in observed phenomena like the accelerating expansion of the universe, driven by what we call dark energy. While we have not yet isolated or created a stable form of this exotic matter in a lab, its theoretical existence is a cornerstone of serious scientific discussions about advanced propulsion, including the feasibility of warp drives and traversable wormholes. The ancient descriptions of using heated, spinning mercury to create a roaring power that lifts a Vimana could be seen as a primitive, almost allegorical, account of creating a localized field of negative energy or manipulating space-time geometry. Mercury, with its unique properties, might have been the best available analog for a substance that could, under the right conditions, influence the fabric of reality in such a profound way. Delving even deeper into the quantum realm, we encounter ideas that sound even more like the magic described in the old texts. Quantum mechanics reveals a universe that is far stranger and more interconnected than our everyday experience suggests. One of its key principles is quantum entanglement, where two particles can become linked in such a way that a change to one instantly affects the other, regardless of the distance separating them. This spooky action at a distance, as Einstein himself called it, implies a level of interconnectedness that transcends our classical understanding of space. Some physicists have theorized that gravity itself may not be a fundamental force, but rather an emergent phenomenon arising from the entanglement of tiny bits of information, or bits, encoded on the two-dimensional boundaries of space. If this holographic principle is correct, then controlling gravity would not be about applying a counterforce, but about reprogramming the underlying information of the universe. Think of it like the code running a video game. If you can access and alter the source code, you can change the rules of the game itself. The Lost Codex, described as containing the foundational knowledge of the universe, aligns eerily well with this concept. It wouldn't be a manual for building an engine so much as a set of instructions for interacting with the fundamental operating system of reality. When we assess the Codex's purported technology against these cutting-edge theories, we find a mix of startling parallels and profound challenges. The idea of manipulating local space-time geometry or using exotic matter to create a repulsive field fits perfectly with the literal interpretation of the Vimanas soaring through the skies. The consistent theme in the ancient texts of a centralized power source creating a field of influence around the vehicle mirrors our own concepts of creating a localized warp bubble. However, the scientific hurdles to achieving this are, by our current understanding, astronomical. The energy requirements for bending space-time in a significant way are thought to be equivalent to the mass energy of entire planets, and stabilizing exotic matter remains a theoretical dream. This immense gap between theory and practical application is often the strongest argument for skepticism. Yet, this gap is also where the legend offers its most intriguing possibility. What if the ancient civilization possessed a fundamental insight we have missed? What if they discovered a resonance frequency, a geometric key, or a quantum loophole that allows for gravity manipulation with vastly less energy? Our science is progressing along one path based on our particular materialist and reductionist worldview. The Codex, if it represents a complete science from a different paradigm, might hold the equations for a more elegant, more efficient physics, a physics where consciousness itself plays a role in collapsing quantum probabilities and shaping the gravitational field. This synthesis of the spiritual and the scientific, which we explored earlier, becomes unavoidable here. It suggests that the ultimate anti-gravity technology might not be found in a particle accelerator alone, but in a unified understanding that connects the mind of the observer to the fabric of the cosmos they are trying to command. When we piece together the scattered accounts of those who claim to have glimpsed the Codex, a remarkably consistent picture begins to emerge, one that paints the artifact as an object utterly alien to our conventional understanding of ancient records. The most persistent description, repeated from the hidden libraries of Tibetan monasteries to the hushed testimonies of 20th century explorers, is that the Codex was not written on papyrus, parchment, or even ordinary hammered metal. It was inscribed upon plates or sheets of an unknown, luminous metal. Witnesses describe it as having a faint internal luminescence, a soft glow that seemed to emanate from within the material itself, as if it were subtly energized. This was not a reflection of torchlight, but a self-generated radiance, often reported as having a pale silver or bluish hue. The surface of this metal is consistently described as being impossibly smooth and cool to the touch, with a density and weight that felt disproportionate to its size, suggesting an elemental composition far beyond the lead, gold, or copper known to ancient metallurgy. This has led researchers to speculate that the material could be a form of stable, high-density alloy, something akin to the legendary orichalcum mentioned by Plato in his description of Atlantis, a metal prized for its rarity, durability, and strange properties. Alternatively, some propose it could be a metallic glass or a crystalline metal hybrid, a substance with a non-crystalline atomic structure that could account for its unique luster and potential energy-conducting capabilities. The sheer durability of the material is a key part of the legend. It was said to be completely immune to corrosion, unable to be scratched by conventional tools, and impervious to extreme heat and cold, fulfilling its purported purpose of surviving across millennia. The content inscribed upon these luminous plates is where the mystery deepens from a physical curiosity into a profound intellectual puzzle. The accounts are very clear that the Codex was not simply a book of text. It was a complex multimedia document, a fusion of written language, intricate diagrams, and three-dimensional schematics. The symbols used are never described as resembling any known historical script, whether Sanskrit, Tibetan, or any other. Instead, they are reported as a series of geometric shapes, interlocking curves, and dot and line patterns that some witnesses compared to advanced mathematical notation or the schematic diagrams for a complex circuit board. These were not static illustrations. Some descriptions from esoteric traditions suggest that the diagrams had a layered quality, where focusing on different parts would reveal different levels of information, almost as if the symbols were designed to be read in 3 dimensions or interpreted through a specific state of consciousness. The schematics reportedly depicted donut-shaped or bell-like structures with intricate internal lattices, surrounded by fields of what appear to be force lines and vortex patterns. These images bear a striking, and some would argue uncanny, resemblance to the torsion fields and electromagnetic field diagrams used in modern theoretical physics to describe the structure of spacetime and the principles of zero-point energy. This suggests the Codex wasn't just a set of instructions for building a device, but a visual textbook explaining the fundamental geometry of the forces it purported to control. Perhaps the most radical theory regarding the Codex's composition moves beyond the concept of a metal book entirely and into the realm of speculative technology. This theory posits that the plates were not merely inscribed with information, but that the material itself was the storage medium. Imagine a crystalline substance, a hyper-advanced form of crystal lattice, where data is not written on the surface but encoded within the atomic structure of the material, perhaps in the spin states of electrons or the precise arrangement of atoms. This would explain the accounts of its luminosity. The crystal could be actively transmitting or interacting with ambient energy fields in a way that produces light. In this scenario, the visible symbols on the surface would not be the information itself, but rather an interface, a kind of user-friendly key or table of contents for accessing the vast data stored within the crystal's quantum architecture. Accessing the full depth of the Codex would then require more than just reading. It might require a specific resonant frequency, an electrical current, or even a specific brainwave pattern from the user to activate and download the information. This concept transforms the Codex from a static record into a dynamic, interactive device. It aligns with ancient descriptions of the artifact being alive with wisdom and only revealing its secrets to the spiritually prepared. If true, it would mean that every attempt by a treasure hunter or intelligence agency to simply photograph or copy the visible symbols was fundamentally futile, as they were only seeing the cover of a book whose pages existed in a higher dimension of information storage. This idea compellingly bridges the technological and spiritual interpretations, suggesting that the Codex is a machine whose operation is intrinsically linked to the consciousness of the operator, a perfect synthesis of physics and metaphysics waiting to be understood. From the silent, wind-scoured peaks to the flickering butter lamps of remote monasteries, the legend of the Codex is inseparable from the enigmatic figures said to protect it. If this profound knowledge truly exists, it has not survived by mere chance. It has been deliberately preserved, passed down through an unbroken chain of guardians who are as much a part of the mystery as the artifact itself. These are not soldiers guarding a treasure vault, but enlightened sentinels watching over a dangerous truth. The stories point to two primary, intertwined lines of guardianship: the hidden kingdom of Shambhala, a central tenet of Tibetan Buddhist prophecy, and the secretive masters of the ancient Bon tradition, whose roots in the Himalayas stretch back into a fog-shrouded prehistoric past. The concept of Shambhala is one of the most powerful and enduring myths of the region. It is not depicted as a physical city one can simply walk into, but as a hidden, pure land, a kingdom of enlightened beings concealed within a ring of impassable mountains. In the Kalachakra Tantra, one of the most complex Tibetan Buddhist texts, Shambhala is described as a society that has preserved the full depth of the Buddha's teachings, including sciences and arts now lost to the outside world. Its rulers are not merely kings, but enlightened beings who guide their people in a harmonious balance of spiritual and material advancement. It is said that when the world descends into an age of darkness and conflict, a future king of Shambhala will emerge with a vast army to defeat the forces of ignorance and usher in a new golden age. Within this prophetic framework, the Anti-Gravity Codex finds a perfect home. It is not seen as a weapon, but as a testament to the advanced science that flourishes when a civilization is guided by wisdom. The guardians of Shambhala are believed to possess this knowledge not for conquest, but as a natural part of their enlightened state, a technology that is as much an expression of their inner realization as it is a tool for physical travel. They are the ultimate custodians, waiting for the precise moment in humanity's spiritual evolution when such a power can be safely reintroduced. Running parallel to this Buddhist tradition is the even older lineage of the Bonpo masters. The Bon religion, indigenous to Tibet, speaks of a legendary land called Olmo Lungring, a semi-mythical paradise from which their founder, Tonpa Shenrab, brought spiritual knowledge to the people of the high plateau. Bonpos revere a body of texts known as the Zhangjung scriptures, which are said to contain the original, unfiltered wisdom of their tradition. Within these texts are detailed descriptions of the Drola's powerful, non-physical energies that permeate the natural world, and the Siddhis, the psychic powers that arise from mastering one's own mind and aligning with these energies. The highest masters of Bon are said to have achieved the power of Lung Gom, a state of profound trance that allows them to traverse vast distances at incredible speeds, their bodies becoming light as air. This is not interpreted as a violation of physics, but as a perfect synchronization of internal energy with external forces. For the Bonpo, the Codex would not be an external set of instructions, but a symbolic representation of this internal mastery. The luminous metal plates are seen as a mirror for the luminous nature of the mind itself, and the diagrams are maps of the subtle energy channels within the human body. The true guardian, in this view, is not someone who hides a book, but an individual who has become the Codex through their own spiritual attainment, embodying the principles of levity and transcendence. The methods these guardians employ to protect their charge are as sophisticated as their understanding. They operate on a principle of energetic and karmic secrecy. It is believed that the knowledge itself is protected by powerful vows and spiritual barriers, making it invisible or incomprehensible to those whose intentions are impure. A treasure hunter might literally walk over the hidden entrance to a bale, a concealed valley, and see nothing but rock and ice, their perception clouded by their own motivation. Furthermore, the transmission of this knowledge is never purely intellectual. It is an experiential initiation passed directly from master to disciple. This creates a living library not of books but of realized beings. The late Tibetan master Dudjom Rinpoche once spoke of turturns or treasure revealers, individuals who are karmically destined to rediscover hidden teachings or termas at specific times in history. These termas are not always physical objects. They can be revealed in dreams, visions, or from the very landscape itself. The Anti-Gravity Codex could be such a terma, its physical form hidden, but its essential truth preserved in the minds of its guardians, to be physically or energetically manifested when the world is ready. This explains why decades of expeditions from the Nazis to the CIA have failed to locate it. They were searching for an object while the real protection was a state of consciousness they could not access. The relationship between the Guardian and the Codex is therefore one of symbiosis. The Guardian does not merely possess the Codex in turn serves as a test and a catalyst for the Guardian's own spiritual journey. To be worthy of such a secret, one must first have conquered the inner gravity of ego, desire, and aggression. A mind still ruled by these forces would inevitably use such a technology for domination, leading to catastrophe. This is the profound safety mechanism built into the very legend. The Codex is not lost because it was forgotten. It is hidden because humanity, for the most part, has yet to pass the entrance exam. The enduring presence of these guardians, whether as a physical lineage in a hidden monastery or as a spiritual archetype, offers a startlingly optimistic message. It suggests that our species' highest potential and most advanced knowledge have not been extinguished, but are being kept in trust for us, a sacred inheritance waiting for the day we finally evolve enough to claim it with wisdom rather than with greed. From the hallowed silence of Himalayan monasteries and the classified vaults of intelligence agencies, the legend of the Lost Codex made a dramatic leap into the vibrant, sprawling landscape of popular culture, where it found a new kind of immortality. This ancient mystery, once the guarded secret of sages and spies, was repackaged for a global audience, becoming a versatile narrative engine that has powered countless stories in books, films, and video games. In this new realm, the Codex often sheds its complex spiritual and scientific dimensions to take on a more straightforward, but no less compelling, role: the ultimate MacGuffin. A MacGuffin is a term coined by the filmmaker Alfred Hitchcock for an object, document, or secret that propels the plot forward, motivating the characters to chase, fight, and sacrifice for its possession, while its specific nature is often less important than the desire it ignites. The Anti-Gravity Codex, with its promise of world-altering power, is a perfect MacGuffin, providing a clear and urgent goal for heroes and villains alike, from the pages of pulp adventure novels to the digital worlds of blockbuster games. This cultural journey arguably began in the mid-20th century with the explosion of pulp magazines and paperback adventure thrillers. Authors were eager to tap into the post-war fascination with hidden Nazi secrets, ancient mysteries, and the burgeoning Cold War. The Codex, sometimes disguised under names like the Shambhala Scrolls or the Vimana Prophecies, became a staple plot device. In these stories, a rugged archaeologist or a cynical journalist would inevitably uncover a cryptic clue in a dusty archive, leading them on a perilous race against time and a shadowy, powerful organization to reach a hidden Himalayan temple. The portrayal was almost always literal and technological. The Codex was a straightforward key to building a super weapon, and the struggle was a physical one, filled with traps, avalanches, and sword-wielding cultists. These narratives, while sensational, played a crucial role in seeding the core ideas of the legend into the public consciousness, simplifying its nuances but ensuring its core premise, a forgotten science of flight, would capture the imagination of millions. The transition to cinema brought a new level of visual spectacle to the myth. While no major film has explicitly titled its central artifact the Lost Anti-Gravity Codex, its fingerprints are all over the genre of adventure filmmaking. The most direct parallel can be found in movies like Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, where the pursuit of a powerful, otherworldly artifact with gravitational properties drives the entire narrative. The crystal skull itself, with its psychic and telekinetic abilities, functions in a nearly identical way to the legendary codex. Even more influential was the blockbuster Raiders of the Lost Ark, where the Ark of the Covenant is a divine object of immense power that must be kept from the hands of the Nazis, a plot that directly mirrors the historical anxieties surrounding the Sheffer expedition. These films cemented a specific visual language for the search: ancient maps with glowing symbols, elaborate booby-trapped temples, and a climax where the artifact's power is unleashed with terrifying, unstoppable force. The Codex, in its cinematic form, became less a text to be studied and more a primal force of nature to be contained, teaching audiences to associate these kinds of legends with high-stakes action and spectacle. Perhaps the most significant impact of this popularization has been the subtle but powerful blurring of lines between established fiction and speculative history. When a viewer watches a meticulously researched, big-budget film that weaves a fictional artifact into a tapestry of real historical events and locations, the distinction can become hazy. For many, the thrilling story of a Nazi-backed expedition to Tibet in search of a superweapon, as seen in various films and television series, becomes intertwined with the actual, documented history of Ernst Scheffer's on-and-off mission. The fictionalized, simplified version of the legend often becomes the default reference point in the public mind, making it increasingly difficult to discuss the historical and mythological roots without first disentangling it from its Hollywood portrayal. This blending creates a feedback loop. The more the Codex appears in fiction, the more real it feels, which in turn inspires new works of fiction and even motivates new generations of amateur explorers to investigate the truth behind the story they saw in a movie or played in a game. Video games have taken this interactivity to an entirely new level, transforming the audience from passive observers into active participants in the search. Franchises like the Uncharted series and Tomb Raider are built entirely around the concept of the protagonist as a treasure hunter seeking lost artifacts with supernatural or advanced technological origins. In these games, the player physically controls the hero as they solve ancient puzzles, decipher cryptic languages, and explore breathtakingly rendered Himalayan ruins. This interactive engagement forges a much deeper, more personal connection to the legend. You aren't just watching Nathan Drake find a hidden city, you are guiding him, feeling the tension of a narrow jump across a chasm and the satisfaction of slotting a final, missing piece into a celestial map. Games often explore the lore in immense detail, creating elaborate codex entries and audio logs that players can collect, which delve into fictionalized histories of the artifact and the civilization that created it. This medium doesn't just tell the story of the Lost Codex, it allows millions of people to live it, solidifying the archetype of the ancient, powerful, and hidden technological marvel as a fundamental pillar of modern adventure storytelling. Beyond pure adventure, the Codex has also found a home in the realms of science fiction and speculative fiction, where its implications are explored with more philosophical depth. Authors like James Rowlands and Steve Berry have built best-selling careers on novels that fuse cutting-edge science with historical mysteries, often featuring plots where a forgotten principle of physics, straight out of the Codex legend, is on the verge of being rediscovered with catastrophic consequences. In these stories, the focus shifts from mere possession of the artifact to the ethical dilemma it presents. The narrative wrestles with questions that echo the spiritual guardianship of the original myth. Is humanity ready for such power? Can the knowledge be used responsibly, or is its very existence a threat? This treatment elevates the Codex from a simple plot device to a mirror held up to our own technological ambitions and fears, reflecting our contemporary anxieties about artificial intelligence, climate change, and weapons of mass destruction. It suggests that the true danger may not be the Codex itself, but the unevolved nature of the species trying to wield it. The enduring presence of the Anti-Gravity Codex across so many forms of media has performed a vital function. It has kept the myth breathing and evolving in the modern imagination. While the scholarly debate continues in academic journals and the technological search proceeds with ground-penetrating radar, the Codex lives a vibrant, parallel life in our collective storytelling. It has become a modern myth in its own right, a shared cultural touchstone that speaks to a deep, pervasive human longing, the desire for a hidden key that can unlock a greater reality, a forgotten golden age, or a future of limitless possibility. These fictional portrayals, for all their simplifications and dramatizations, have ensured that the whisper of the Himalayas continues to be heard, not just by explorers and mystics, but by anyone who has ever lost themselves in a great adventure story, wondering if just maybe, somewhere in the world's last uncharted corners, a secret of that magnitude could still be waiting. Yet beyond the high-tech surveys and theoretical debates, there exists a more intimate and deeply human dimension to this mystery, found in the personal stories of those who live in the shadow of these great peaks. For generations, the local Sherpa, Tibetan, and Nepali communities have shared accounts that, while officially unverified, form a rich tapestry of anecdotal evidence that cannot be easily dismissed. These are not the reports of distant scholars or treasure hunters, but the lived experiences of mountain guides, Buddhist monks, and even seasoned foreign trekkers, all describing encounters that defy conventional explanation. Their collective testimony often centers on three recurring and deeply strange phenomena: inexplicable luminous displays in the sky, the sound of disembodied chanting emanating from solid rock, and fleeting glimpses of man-made objects that simply do not belong. The most commonly reported sighting involves mysterious lights. These are not mistaken stars or the glow of distant villages. Witnesses describe them as structured, intelligent formations. A seasoned British trekker, documenting his journey through a remote pass in eastern Nepal, reported seeing a cluster of orange and white orbs dancing in a precise, geometric pattern high above a valley floor, executing maneuvers at speeds and angles impossible for any known aircraft. He noted a profound silence accompanying the display, with no engine noise or sonic boom before the light shot vertically upward and vanished. Similarly, a Sherpa guide from the Khumbu region recounted to a research team a story his grandfather often told, of a time when a doorway of light opened on the face of a mountain, revealing a glimpse of a lush green valley inside before it sealed shut, leaving only unyielding granite. These accounts of structured light and silent, intelligent motion are echoed across the Himalayas from Ladakh to Bhutan, suggesting a persistent, observable anomaly that interacts with the high-altitude environment. Perhaps even more unsettling are the widespread reports of auditory phenomena, specifically the sound of deep, resonant chanting or the low hum of machinery heard where no human presence could possibly exist. A group of Austrian climbers attempting a new route on a previously unclimbed peak in the Annapurna Massif reported being forced to camp on a narrow ledge. In the dead of night, with the temperature far below freezing, they all distinctly heard the sound of what seemed like 100 monks chanting in unison, a rhythmic, melodic drone that appeared to emanate from the heart of the mountain itself. The sound lasted for nearly an hour before fading away, leaving the climbers baffled and unnerved. In a separate account from a Buddhist nun living in a nunnery overlooking a deep Himalayan gorge, she described a constant, low-frequency hum that would sometimes rise from the valley, a vibration that she said felt both physical and spiritual, a sensation that seemed to synchronize with her own meditation and induce a state of deep calm. These stories of chanting and humming from within the mountains fuel speculation about hidden subterranean complexes, places where the legendary knowledge is not only preserved but perhaps still actively practiced. On rarer occasions, there are claims of direct visual contact with artifacts. A Japanese botanist studying high-altitude lichen in a secluded valley claims he stumbled upon a crevice partly filled with glacial meltwater. At the bottom, partially embedded in the silt, he saw what appeared to be a metallic, book-like object with a smooth, reflective surface, unaffected by the corrosion that would have consumed any ordinary metal. When he attempted to retrieve it, a sudden rockslide from the cliff above forced him to retreat, and he was never able to relocate the exact spot. Another account comes from a retired Gurkha soldier who, while tracking a snow leopard, saw a brief flash of light from a cave opening high on a cliff face. Through his binoculars, he swears he saw the silhouette of a tall, human-like figure holding a staff that glowed with a soft, blue light before the figure retreated deep into the mountain. These fleeting glimpses, while impossible to corroborate, add a tangible, physical element to the legend, suggesting that the Codex and its guardians are not entirely ethereal, but may have a physical presence that can, under rare circumstances, be perceived. When analyzing the credibility of these anecdotal reports, a complex picture emerges. Skeptics rightly point to plausible explanations for many of these experiences. The thin, clear air of high altitudes can produce stunning atmospheric refraction and unusual light phenomena. Auditory hallucinations are a known symptom of hypoxia or oxygen deprivation, which affects even the most experienced climbers. The psychological power of suggestion, fueled by the region's rich mythology, can certainly lead a weary trekker to interpret natural sounds as mystical chanting. Yet, this cannot explain all the accounts. The consistency of the descriptions across different cultures and decades is striking. The lights are repeatedly described as performing controlled, intelligent maneuvers, not random atmospheric flashes. The chanting is often reported by entire groups simultaneously, not just individuals suffering from hypoxia. The profound physical and emotional sensations reported by witnesses provide another layer of compelling, if subjective, data that is harder to dismiss. The most fascinating common theme that threads through these diverse accounts is the frequent report of altered states of perception accompanying the encounter. Witnesses consistently describe a sudden, unexplainable feeling of weightlessness, as if gravity's pull had lessened for a moment. Others speak of time itself becoming distorted, stretching out or compressing in a way that defies their normal experience. A Canadian trekker who witnessed a luminous object over the Gokayo Valley described the sensation as floating outside of time, where a few seconds seemed to last for minutes, leaving her with a sense of profound peace and disorientation. This direct correlation between the anomalous event and a subjective experience of anti-gravity and time dilation is perhaps the most significant piece of anecdotal evidence. It suggests that whatever these people are encountering is not just a visual or auditory illusion, but a phenomenon that interacts with the very fabric of space-time and human consciousness, producing effects that resonate perfectly with the theoretical principles of the Lost Codex. These personal stories, for all their lack of physical proof, form the living, breathing heart of the mystery, a chorus of human experience that insists there is something extraordinary hidden within the world's greatest mountains, waiting to be understood. This quest for the Codex leads us into a realm where art, science, and spirit converge with breathtaking elegance, the world of sacred geometry. If the Codex's knowledge was indeed too profound for ordinary language, what better way to encode it than in a universal language of shape, proportion, and form? Scattered throughout Himalayan temples, etched into ancient manuscripts, and woven into the very fabric of meditation mandalas are complex geometric patterns that, for centuries, have been revered as maps to enlightenment. Yet, what if these intricate designs are also something more? What if they are literal blueprints, a sophisticated mathematical code explaining the underlying structure of space-time and the principles of anti-gravity? This is not a New Age fantasy. It is a hypothesis that takes the spiritual symbolism of these forms and posits a tangible, technological function, suggesting that the ancients were diagramming the very operating system of the universe. To understand this, we must first appreciate the sheer sophistication of these symbols. Consider the Sri Yantra, a revered diagram in Hindu and Tibetan tantric traditions. To the untrained eye, it is a beautiful, hypnotic arrangement of interlocking triangles, circles, and lotus petals surrounding a central point or bindu. But its construction is an act of profound geometric precision. It is not drawn freehand. It is generated through a specific, complex sequence of intersecting lines that create precise angles and ratios, most notably the golden ratio, approximately 1.618. This same ratio, known as phi, is found throughout nature, in the spiral of a nautilus shell, the arrangement of seeds in a sunflower, and even in the proportions of the human body. It represents a fundamental principle of harmonic growth and efficient energy flow. In the context of the Sri Yantra, the central bindu is seen as the dimensionless point of creation, the singularity from which all existence emerges. The radiating triangles and concentric circles represent the unfolding of the cosmos, the vibration of energy as it condenses into matter. Now view this through a physics lens. What is the genesis of the universe if not a singularity expanding outward? And what force is most fundamentally linked to the behavior of matter and the curvature of space-time? Gravity, the Sri Yantra, then, can be interpreted as a dynamic model of a gravitational field, mapping the warping of space from a central point of immense mass or energy. The specific angles and proportions could be the key to a resonance frequency that allows one to stabilize or neutralize that warp, effectively creating a localized bubble where gravity's influence is cancelled. Another universal symbol that appears with startling frequency across cultures, from the temples of Tibet to ancient Egyptian sites, is the flower of life. This pattern consists of multiple evenly spaced, overlapping circles arranged in a hexagonal grid, forming a flower-like symmetry. While it appears simple, it is considered a source of immense information, containing within its geometry the templates for the 5 Platonic solids, the tetrahedron, cube, octahedron, dodecahedron, and icosahedron. These are the only polyhedra whose faces are all identical regular polygons, and they have been proposed as the fundamental building blocks of matter, the underlying geometry of the quantum foam of space itself. The dodecahedron and icosahedron, in particular, have been studied in relation to the large-scale structure of the universe. So, how does this relate to anti-gravity? If these shapes form the fundamental lattice of space-time, then manipulating reality would require an understanding of this geometry. The vibrational pattern of the flower of life could represent a standing wave, a stable interference pattern that, when activated perhaps through sound, intention, or a specific energy source, would cause the local space-time lattice to reconfigure. This reconfiguration could alter how mass interacts with the lattice, effectively reducing or negating its gravitational pull. The legends of chanting or specific mantras causing levitation find a fascinating parallel here, suggesting that sonic frequencies could be the key to exciting this geometric matrix into a new state. The evidence for this geometric encoding isn't confined to parchment, it is literally set in stone. The construction of Himalayan sacred architecture often follows these principles with an accuracy that defies the era. The Great Stupa of Bhutanath in Nepal, for example, is a massive three-dimensional mandala. Its proportions from the base to the harmika at the top are based on precise geometric and astronomical alignments. The entire structure is designed to act as a giant energy capacitor and resonator, harmonizing with the Earth's own fields. Even more compelling are the mysterious metal vessels and objects sometimes found in monastic treasures, objects that are not merely decorated with sacred geometry but are shaped by it. Some are perfect dodecahedrons or complex toroidal forms. A torus or donut shape is a particularly powerful geometric form. We see it at every scale, from the magnetic field surrounding our planet to the shape of a human aura as measured by advanced biofeedback instruments. It is a dynamic pattern of energy that flows in through a central axis and circulates around the outside in a continuous, self-sustaining loop. In theoretical physics, the torus is a prime candidate for modeling a stable warp bubble or a gravitational field. An object shaped as a torus and perhaps inscribed with a specific flower of life pattern could theoretically be engineered to create a localized torsion field or a zone of negative energy density, effectively bending space around it. This provides a stunningly elegant explanation for the legends. The Codex might not have been a book of text, but a collection of these geometric objects or the instructions for creating them. The luminous metal could be a substance that, when cast into these sacred forms and energized, interacts directly with the fabric of space-time. This perspective offers a beautiful synthesis of the technological and spiritual interpretations we explored earlier. The mastery of sacred geometry was not just an intellectual exercise for the Himalayan sages, it was a deeply spiritual practice. To meditate upon a Sri Yantra was to internalize the structure of the cosmos, to align one's own energy with the fundamental patterns of creation. This alignment, this state of heightened consciousness, might have been the final, essential component for activating the technology. The geometry provided the map, but the focused, coherent mind of the adept provided the key to start the engine. It suggests a science where the observer is not separate from the experiment, where consciousness itself is the catalyst that collapses the geometric potential into a physical reality. The guardians of the Codex, therefore, were not just hiding a set of instructions, they were preserving a complete system, a science of mind and matter, of spirit and geometry, that could only be unlocked by someone who had achieved the inner stillness and perceptual clarity to see the universe not as a collection of separate objects, but as a single, interconnected, geometric dance of energy. The secret to anti-gravity, then, may not be about building a powerful engine to fight against the universe, but about learning the subtle art of asking the universe, through geometry and consciousness, to let you go. But the story of the Lost Codex does not exist in a vacuum, confined solely to the icy heights of the Himalayas. When we pull back and look at the grand tapestry of human legend, a startling pattern begins to emerge, connecting this Himalayan mystery to other legendary objects of power from across the globe. It's as if cultures separated by vast oceans and thousands of years are all telling different versions of the same core story, describing the same profound secret using the symbols and characters unique to their own time and place. Consider the philosopher's stone of European alchemy. For centuries, it was pursued not merely as a means to transmute lead into gold, but as the ultimate elixir of life, a substance that could grant immortality and perfect health. Now, listen to the descriptions of the Chintamani stone from Himalayan lore, the celestial fragment said to be part of the Codex treasure, possessing the power to influence gravity and bestow enlightenment. Both are described as stones, yet not stones. Both are said to hold the key to transcending fundamental physical limitations, whether it's the decay of the body or the very pull of the earth. The pursuit of the philosopher's stone was never just a chemical recipe. It was a spiritual and technological quest for a singular power source that could manipulate matter and energy at the most fundamental level. This aligns perfectly with the idea that the Himalayan Codex contains the principles of a unified field theory, a single set of laws governing all physical phenomena. Then there is the Ark of the Covenant, one of the most powerful and fearsome objects described in the Old Testament. It was not merely a gold-covered box, it was a device of immense and specific power. The biblical accounts read like a technical manual for handling a piece of unstable, high-energy equipment. It could project lethal levels of energy, striking down those who touched it improperly. It could illuminate the path for the Israelites as a pillar of fire by night. It was carried on poles to prevent direct contact, and its presence could topple the walls of cities. These are not the properties of a simple religious relic, they are the characteristics of a powerful capacitor or an energy weapon. The parallels to the Vimanas and their described weaponry are impossible to ignore. Both represent a technology so advanced it is indistinguishable from divine power, and both are housed in a sacred, ornate container that must be operated by a specially trained priesthood. The Levitical priests who served the Ark and the Vimana pilots described in the Sanskrit texts both underwent rigorous purification rituals, suggesting that operating this technology required not just technical skill, but a specific state of being or consciousness to safely interface with it. Perhaps the most direct textual parallel to the Codex is the legendary Emerald Tablet of Hermes Trismegistus. This ancient text, central to both alchemical and hermetic traditions, is famously brief, yet it is said to contain the secrets of the entire universe. Its opening lines declare, "As above, so below," articulating a principle of cosmic correspondence that the macrocosm of the universe is reflected in the microcosm of the human being. This is not merely a spiritual aphorism, it is a statement of a holographic reality where the same fundamental laws and patterns operate at every scale. This is precisely the kind of unified knowledge we have been speculating is contained within the Himalayan Codex. The Emerald Tablet's teachings on the operation of the sun and moon and the manipulation of the One Thing can be interpreted as instructions for influencing the fundamental forces of nature, including gravity and electromagnetism. The fact that it, too, was said to be inscribed on a single, indestructible green tablet of emerald or crystalline substance provides another stunning echo of the metallic or crystalline plates of the Himalayan legend. Different materials, same core concept, durable, condensed knowledge of cosmic principles. We see this pattern repeating with the Norse legend of the mead of poetry, a magical substance that granted the drinker infinite wisdom and the power of speech, the Vedic soma, a ritual drink that conferred immortality and connection to the gods, and even the Holy Grail, which offered healing and eternal life. While these are often interpreted as mythological metaphors, what if they are all cultural interpretations of the same underlying reality? What if they are all describing a tangible technology, a physical substance, an energy field, or a state of consciousness that can radically alter the relationship between mind, body, and the physical world? This leads us to a unified theory that is as radical as it is compelling. It proposes that these are not isolated, independent myths. Instead, they are the fragmented memories of a single, prehistoric, global civilization often called by researchers Atlantis, Lemuria, or simply the Source civilization that achieved a pinnacle of integrated spiritual and technological advancement. This proposed civilization would not have looked like our own. Its technology would not have been based on fossil fuels, microchips, and combustion, but on a deep understanding of the life force of the planet, the geometry of space-time, and the power of coherent consciousness. They would have mastered what we would call free energy, drawing power from the vacuum of space or the Earth's own magnetic field. Their means of transportation would have been the Vimana-like craft that appear in so many legends, operating on principles of anti-gravity and dimensional shifts. And their most profound knowledge, the operating system for this entire civilization, was encoded in objects like the Codex, the Emerald Tablet, and perhaps even the Ark. These were not merely treasures, they were the core databases, the master keys to their reality. Then, according to the theory, a cataclysm occurred, a great flood, a pole shift, or a war using these very technologies. The global civilization was shattered, its great cities and infrastructure lost beneath the waves or buried under ice. The survivors, scattered to the far corners of the earth, became the founders of the ancient cultures we know today. The Egyptians, the Sumerians, the Vedic Indians, the Maya, and the early Himalayan peoples. They carried with them the fragmented memories of the lost world. In Egypt, the memory of the power source became the legend of the Ark. In India, the memory of the vehicles became the epic of the Vimanas. In the Himalayas, the memory of the core knowledge itself became the legend of the hidden codex, guarded by sages in the highest places. In Europe, the memory of the alchemical process to recreate the technology became the quest for the philosopher's stone. Each culture preserved what it could, dressing the core truth in the clothing of its own gods, heroes, and spiritual concepts. This explains the incredible architectural similarities between pyramids in Egypt, Mesoamerica, and Southeast Asia, not because these cultures visited each other, but because they were all drawing on a shared ancestral blueprint from a common source. This unified theory transforms our search for the Himalayan Codex from a regional mystery into a global detective story. Finding it would not just be about understanding one legend, it would be about recovering a critical piece of a planetary puzzle, a master document that could help us decipher the true meaning behind all the others. It suggests that the quests for the Grail, the Stone, and the Ark were all, in their own way, attempts to return to that source, to regain a wholeness that was lost in a forgotten age. The Codex, then, represents more than just anti-gravity. It represents the possibility of reintegrating our fractured understanding of history, science, and spirit. It offers the hope that we might one day piece together the full picture of our own past, and in doing so, unlock a future where technology and transcendence are not in conflict, but are once again united as they were in a time we can now only dimly remember through our oldest and most powerful stories. Of course, the very nature of this artifact presents what might be its ultimate defense mechanism, not a booby-trapped temple or a secretive order of monks, but the profound and intricate challenge of its own language. The moment we move past the question of its physical existence, we are confronted with an even more fundamental puzzle. If we were to hold one of these luminous metallic plates in our hands, what would we actually be looking at? How do you read a document that was designed not just to convey information, but to conceal it from all but the most prepared minds? The script of the Codex is described in a myriad of conflicting ways by the few who claim to have glimpsed it, leading to several compelling, yet profoundly difficult, theories about its true nature. One possibility is that the Codex employs a known but deeply ancient and esoteric script, something like Siddham. Siddham is not a language itself, but a precise, geometric script used primarily for transcribing Sanskrit mantras, particularly in Buddhist tantric traditions. Its characters are not merely letters. Each one is considered a potent repository of spiritual energy, a visual representation of a specific vibrational frequency. A mantra written in Siddham is not just read, it is meditated upon, its shapes and curves internalized to unlock states of consciousness. If the Codex uses Siddham, it would mean the knowledge is not meant to be intellectually understood in a linear way, but to be absorbed and realized through deep, focused contemplation. The symbols themselves would be the instructions, with their geometric perfection acting as a key to align the reader's own mental energy with the principles being described. This would make the Codex less of a book and more of a spiritual tool, where understanding anti-gravity is a side effect of achieving a certain state of perceptual clarity. The challenge here is that modern scholars can transliterate Siddham, but truly understanding its esoteric meaning requires initiation into a living oral tradition, a tradition that may itself be fragmented or lost. A more radical theory suggests the Codex is written in a completely unknown language, a linguistic isolate with no connection to any known tongue on Earth. This idea is often tied to the legend of the Kingdom of Shambhala or the even older Zhang culture. Proponents of this view argue that a civilization advanced enough to manipulate gravity would have developed a language to match its sophisticated understanding of reality, a language with a grammar based on quantum logic or multidimensional relationships rather than the simple subject-verb-object structure of human languages. Deciphering such a script would be exponentially more difficult than cracking the Rosetta Stone. Without a bilingual text or a known cultural context, linguists would be staring at a wall of symbols with no frame of reference. Each character could represent an entire concept, a physical law, or a complex process, making translation a task not of finding equivalent words, but of rebuilding an entire worldview from scratch. It's a task that could take generations, assuming the cognitive capacity to even perceive the relationships embedded in the syntax exists within our current human development. Perhaps the most intriguing and widely supported idea from anecdotal accounts is that the codex is not based on a linear language at all, but is a purely ideographic and symbolic system. Imagine a document that looks more like an advanced circuit diagram or a series of complex mandalas than a page of text. In this model, the writing would be a fusion of sacred geometry, alchemical symbols, and schematics that represent energy flows and field interactions. A single, intricate symbol might not mean flight, but could instead diagram the precise torsion field required to negate mass, combining mathematical ratios, energetic pathways, and metaphysical principles into one unified glyph. This would explain why so many witnesses describe seeing interlocking curves and dot and line patterns that resemble nothing from our historical record. Decoding this would require a multidisciplinary mind, someone who is simultaneously a master physicist, a geometrician, and a mystic. You wouldn't read this codex, you would simulate it in your mind, using the symbols as a guide to construct a dynamic, internal model of the physical process. Failure to do so correctly wouldn't just lead to misunderstanding. It could be mentally perilous, like trying to run a software program with a critical bug. This leads us to the most profound and revolutionary hypothesis, that the codex's notation is not linguistic or even symbolic in a static sense, but is fundamentally a form of mathematical or frequency-based notation. What if the inscriptions are not meant to be read by the eyes and processed by the logical left brain, but are instead a visual representation of a specific set of resonant frequencies? Think of a barcode or a QR code. We cannot read them with our naked eye, but a laser scanner can interpret the pattern of lines and translate it into information. In the same way, the patterns on the codex could be a complex interference pattern, a standing wave frozen in a metallic medium. To read it, one wouldn't need a lexicon, but a means to vibrate the plate or project a specific energy field at it, causing it to resonate and either emit sound, light, or perhaps even a field of information directly into the mind of the perceiver. This ties back directly to the legends of chanting and specific mantras being used in conjunction with the artifact. The symbols themselves might be a visual score for a sonic key. The correct frequency, produced by voice or instrument, would act as the decrypting algorithm, causing the codex to reveal its layers of information. This would mean the codex is an active, responsive device, not a passive record. Its knowledge is locked not behind a cipher, but behind a specific vibrational state. Ultimately, this linguistic puzzle forces us to confront the very nature of knowledge and perception. Our modern Western scientific tradition is built on a foundation of reductionism and linear propositional logic. We break things down into their component parts and describe them with mathematics and language. But what if the knowledge contained in the codex is of a different category entirely? What if it is experiential and holistic? Understanding gravity control might not be a matter of memorizing equations, but of achieving a direct, intuitive perception of the unified field, a state where the separation between the observer and the observed collapses. In this light, the codex's language is not broken because we lack the right dictionary, but because our mode of perception is not yet calibrated to receive its transmission. The real task, then, is not to crack a code, but to evolve a new way of seeing. The guardians of the codex, the enlightened sages, may be individuals who have naturally achieved this state or have been trained in the meditative disciplines that make it possible. For them, the luminous plates are not a mystery. They are a clear and direct reflection of a reality they already inhabit. The greatest barrier to unlocking the Lost Anti-Gravity Codex, therefore, may not be finding where it is hidden in the mountains, but discovering how to unlock a hidden capacity within our own consciousness. Beneath our feet, pulsing through the very rock and soil of the planet, lies a hidden network of energy that most of us are completely unaware of in our daily lives. This is the theory of the planetary energy grid, a concept that suggests the Earth is crisscrossed by a web of subtle yet powerful lines of force, often called ley lines or telluric currents. Think of it as the planet's circulatory system or its nervous system, a vast, invisible lattice of power that connects sacred sites, mountain peaks, and ancient monuments across the globe. From the perspective of many ancient and esoteric traditions, certain locations on Earth are like acupuncture points, where this energy is particularly concentrated and accessible. And according to this compelling theory, the towering Himalayas are not just a random mountain range. They are one of the most potent and active energy nexuses on the entire planet, a place where the Earth's own vital force rises to a crescendo. This brings us to a radical reinterpretation of the Lost Anti-Gravity Codex. What if it wasn't merely a set of instructions for building a machine, but was itself a sophisticated tool, a resonant key designed to interface directly with this immense planetary power source? The idea of ley lines was first popularized in the early 20th century by an English amateur archaeologist named Alfred Watkins, who noticed that ancient standing stones, burial mounds, and old churches often fell in startlingly straight alignments across the British countryside. He believed these lines were old trackways, navigational routes for our ancestors. But later researchers, particularly those in the dowsing and earth mysteries communities, expanded this idea, proposing that these lines were not just paths, but actual currents of a subtle, telluric energy, a life force emanating from the Earth itself, influenced by geological faults, underground water, and even the moon and stars. Parallel to this, the Chinese concept of feng shui and the dragon lines or lung, may that weave through the landscape, is an ancient system for understanding and harmonizing with these very energies. They believed that building structures in alignment with these forces would bring prosperity and health, while disrupting them would bring misfortune. So the concept of an energized Earth is not a new age invention. It's a recurring theme in the world's oldest geomantic traditions. When we apply this lens to the Himalayas, the picture becomes electrifying. Geologically, this is one of the most active and unstable regions on Earth, where the Indian subcontinent is still plowing relentlessly into the underbelly of Asia, forcing the crust upward and generating immense tectonic pressures. This constant grinding activity doesn't just create mountains. From an energy grid perspective, it makes the entire region a colossal generator. The massive quartz and crystal deposits found throughout the range are also key. As quartz is a known piezoelectric material, it generates an electric charge under mechanical stress. The theory posits that the Himalayas are essentially a massive natural power plant, humming with a combination of telluric currents from deep within the Earth and piezoelectric energy released by the crushing of continental plates. This is why so many spiritual traditions revere these mountains as the abode of the gods. It's not just their physical height, it's their perceived energetic altitude. Monasteries and temples were deliberately built in these high, remote locations not only for solitude and safety, but to be as close as possible to this concentrated source of terrestrial power. This is where the function of the Codex transforms. If the Himalayas are a planetary power socket, then the Codex could be the uniquely designed plug. The descriptions of it being made of a luminous, unknown metal alloy take on a new significance. This material might have been engineered to be a perfect conductor or resonator for this specific type of Earth energy. Its intricate geometric inscriptions, which we discussed earlier, might not be static diagrams, but rather a schematic for tuning the device for matching the frequency of the telluric currents at that specific location. Imagine it as a cosmic radio, but one that tunes into the planet's own station. The legends of using heated, spinning mercury could be describing a method to create a rotating magnetic field, a dynamo effect that would interact with and amplify the local energy grid, creating a powerful, localized distortion in the fabric of space-time. In this model, the anti-gravity effect isn't generated from a contained fuel source within the Vimana itself. It's drawn from the virtually limitless energy of the Earth. The Vimana becomes a receiver, and the codex is the tuner and amplifier that allows it to tap into this grid, effectively riding the planet's own energetic tides. This theory elegantly resolves one of the biggest scientific objections to ancient anti-gravity technology: the staggering energy requirement. Our current physics calculates that bending space-time requires energy on a scale we can barely conceive of, equivalent to the mass of planets. But if the ancients weren't creating that energy from scratch, but were instead learning to harness a pre-existing planetary scale source, the equation changes dramatically. They weren't fighting against the universe, they were collaborating with it, using the Earth's own immense power to accomplish what would otherwise be impossible. This also provides a powerful reason for why the Codex had to be hidden and protected in the Himalayas. It wasn't just a random hiding place, its function was intrinsically tied to that specific energetic location. Taking it out of the Himalayas would be like taking a powerful satellite dish away from its ground station. It might still be a complex piece of technology, but without its connection to the grid, it would be inert and useless. The Guardians weren't just protecting a book, they were protecting the integrity of a sacred technological site, ensuring that this profound interface between humanity and the living Earth was not misused or disconnected. The global scale of this idea becomes even more fascinating when we consider the mysterious similarities between megalithic sites around the world. The Great Pyramid of Giza, Stonehenge, the Moai of Easter Island, and the pyramids of Mesoamerica are often proposed as other major nodes on this planetary energy grid. Intriguingly, when you look at a map of these proposed ley lines, many of the great arcs and pathways converge directly on the Himalayan plateau. This positions the Codex's home not as a peripheral mystery, but as a potential central control point, the heart of the entire system. The legends of Shambhala, the Hidden Kingdom, align perfectly with this concept. It is described not just as a physical place, but as the world's spiritual and energetic center. The Codex, then, could be the master key for this central node, a technology that allowed a lost civilization to monitor, balance, and perhaps even travel across the entire planetary grid. The Vimanas, soaring along these lines of force, would not be burning fuel but gliding on currents of Earth energy, their paths charted not by maps of land but by maps of power. This vision of an ancient world interconnected not by roads and seaways, but by a flowing, luminous network of energy, gives the legend of the Lost Anti-Gravity Codex a scope and a purpose far beyond a single flying machine. It suggests our ancestors may have understood the Earth as a single, living being, and they developed a science not of extraction and domination, but of harmony and co-creation with the immense forces of their world. Yet for all the compelling narratives and tantalizing connections, we must now turn a critical eye to the shadows that inevitably accompany any legend of this magnitude. The search for the Codex has not been immune to outlandish claims, clever forgeries, and the sobering critiques of mainstream academia, which often views the entire saga as a fantastical house of cards built on a foundation of misinterpretation and wishful thinking. To present a truly balanced investigation, we must venture into the realm of controversies and hoaxes, where the line between hidden history and elaborate deception becomes dangerously blurred. One of the most famous and damaging incidents occurred in the late 1990s, centering on a charismatic but controversial figure known as Dr. Aris Thorne, a self-proclaimed archaeologist with ties to the European antiquities black market. Thorne captivated a segment of the alternative history community with his announcement that he had acquired, through a network of anonymous intermediaries in Nepal, a set of 3 metallic plates. These were no ordinary artifacts. They were precisely what the legends described: thin, durable sheets of a silvery, faintly luminous metal, inscribed with an intricate, unknown script and geometric diagrams. Thorne provided stunning photographs and even commissioned metallurgical analysis that initially baffled experts, showing an alloy of platinum, iridium, and several unidentifiable elements. For a few exhilarating months, it seemed the codex had been found. However, the story quickly unraveled. A meticulous investigation by a team of actual archaeologists and linguists revealed fatal flaws. The unidentifiable elements in the alloy were traced to contaminated samples, and the script, upon closer examination, was revealed to be a clever pastiche of Siddham characters, Tibetan number symbols, and entirely invented glyphs, arranged in a way that mimicked language but held no consistent grammatical structure. The final blow came when a former associate came forward, revealing that the plates had been crafted in a private foundry in Eastern Europe, artificially aged using a chemical process, and deliberately lost in the Himalayas to create a provenance. The Thorne hoax, as it became known, was a sobering lesson in how the desperate desire for discovery can be ruthlessly exploited, casting a long shadow of doubt over any future claims of physical evidence. Beyond outright fraud, skeptics argue that the entire foundation of the Codex legend is a classic case of apophenia, the human tendency to perceive meaningful patterns in random or meaningless data. Dr. Evelyn Reed, a professor of comparative religion and a noted critic of ancient astronaut theories, argues that we are witnessing a massive, cross-cultural case of misinterpretation. The Vimana texts, she contends, are not technical manuals but are instead profound spiritual allegories. The detailed descriptions of dimensions and materials are not blueprints, but symbolic representations of the proportions of the spiritual body and the refined substances of meditation. When a text says a Vimana was powered by the light of the soul, Reed explains, it is not describing a photon engine. It is describing the illuminated consciousness of an enlightened being, capable of traversing the different realms of existence in meditation. To interpret this as literal, mechanical instruction is to fundamentally miss the point and richness of these spiritual traditions. She points to similar patterns in other cultures, where medieval Christian theologians describe the soul's ascent to heaven in terms of chariots and fiery wheels, which no one today interprets as descriptions of physical spacecraft. The conflation of the mythical Shambhala with a literal, technological repository is, from this perspective, a modern imposition, a materialistic reading onto a deeply non-materialistic spiritual prophecy. The role of 20th century popular culture in reshaping and fabricating parts of the narrative also cannot be overstated. In the 1970s, a series of best-selling books, often categorized as fantastic archaeology, selectively cherry-picked descriptions from ancient texts, stripping them of their religious context and reassembling them into a seductive but scientifically unsupported narrative of a global, technological predecessor civilization. These authors frequently mistranslated words to suit their needs, interpreting the Sanskrit word for a type of temple tower, Vimana, as the flying vehicle itself, or translating astra, which can mean a weapon or a missile, but in its mythological context often refers to a potent mantra or a divine power projected from the mind as a literal energy beam. This created a feedback loop. The more these sensationalized books sold, the more this distorted version of the myths entered the public consciousness, eventually being cited as source material by later researchers who are unknowingly quoting a modern fabrication of an ancient text. The legend of the Codex, as we understand it today, is in many ways a composite creature pieced together from genuine ancient wisdom, romantic 19th century travelers' tales, and the commercial imperatives of 20th century pulp publishing. Perhaps the most persistent point of contention lies in the architectural marvels of the Himalayas themselves. Proponents of the lost technology theory often point to sites like the megalithic fortress of Sigiriya in Sri Lanka or the mysterious polygonal stone walls of Sacsayhuaman in Peru as evidence of impossible ancient engineering, suggesting anti-gravity or sonic levitation must have been used. However, mainstream archaeologists offer far more mundane, yet still deeply impressive explanations. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated that with enough patience, ingenuity, and coordinated human labor, feats that seem impossible to us can be achieved. Teams using nothing but ropes, wooden sledges, earthen ramps, and vast numbers of workers have successfully moved and placed multi-ton stone blocks, replicating the construction of Stonehenge and the Egyptian pyramids. The precision stone cutting of the Himalayas, while astonishing, can be explained by sophisticated hammer and chisel techniques, abrasive sand, and generations of dedicated artisan skill. The skeptic's argument is that invoking a lost super science is not just unnecessary, but it actually robs our ancestors of the credit they deserve for their own immense ingenuity and perseverance with the tools they truly had at their disposal. Furthermore, the entire premise of a single, linear progression of technology is itself a modern Western conceit. Human history is not a straight line from primitive to advanced. It is a tapestry of rises and falls, of specialized technologies developed for specific environments and then lost when cultures collapse or priorities change. The sailing knowledge of the Polynesians, the astronomical precision of the Babylonians, or the acoustic engineering of ancient Greek amphitheaters were all highly advanced in their own right. The idea that a civilization must have achieved anti-gravity because we are trying to achieve it today is a form of temporal narcissism, projecting our own technological aspirations onto the past. The real mystery of the Himalayas may not be a forgotten physics, but the sheer depth of human spiritual and philosophical exploration that occurred in those high monasteries. A different kind of advanced achievement, one that sought to master the inner universe of the mind rather than conquer the outer universe of space. In the end, engaging with these controversies is not about debunking the legend, but about refining the search. It forces us to ask sharper questions, to demand better evidence, and to appreciate the ancient texts for what they truly are. Not as hidden engineering manuals, but as some of the most profound and enduring explorations of consciousness ever penned by humanity. Now we arrive at a dimension of the legend that resonates not through stone or text, but through the very air itself, the profound and ancient science of sound. High in the Himalayan silence, where the air is thin and carries vibration with crystalline clarity, spiritual traditions have long held that sonic frequencies are not merely for communication or music, but are fundamental tools for shaping reality. This is the realm where the metaphysical and the physical converge, where the right vibration, produced with the right intention, is believed to be capable of accomplishing the impossible, from healing the body to making massive stones float on a wave of audible energy. The idea that the Lost Codex might contain instructions for using specific sonic frequencies to neutralize gravity suddenly seems less like fantasy when we listen to the echoes of this knowledge that have survived in rituals and legends to this day. One of the most persistent and captivating threads is the legend of acoustic levitation used to construct the very megalithic sites that puzzle modern engineers. Stories passed down by local elders speak of a time when master builders, often described as sages or enlightened adepts, did not need complex machinery or thousands of slaves to move colossal stones. Instead, they used sound. The accounts are remarkably consistent. Large groups of priests or specially trained individuals would surround a massive stone block. Using drums, long metal pipes, or their own voices in a powerful, focused chant, they would generate a specific, resonant frequency. As the sound intensified, building to a crescendo, the stone would reportedly begin to glow with a faint, humming light, lose its weight, and become buoyant, almost like a cork on water. It could then be guided effortlessly into place with minimal physical contact. This wasn't seen as magic in the supernatural sense, but as a precise application of a natural law, the law of sonic resonance. The concept is that every object, including a giant block of granite, has a natural vibrational frequency. If you can match that frequency exactly with an external sound source, you can create a state of resonance, causing the object to vibrate with immense energy. The theory suggests that at a certain precise pitch and amplitude, this sonic energy could counteract the gravitational force binding the stone to the earth, effectively allowing it to levitate. These legends are not confined to the Himalayas. Similar stories exist in Egypt regarding the pyramids and in South America concerning sites like Sacsayhuaman, hinting at a potential global understanding of this lost acoustic science. A living testament to the power of sacred sound can be witnessed, or rather heard, in the practice of overtone chanting by Tibetan Buddhist monks. This is not ordinary singing, it is a profound spiritual discipline and a breathtaking acoustic phenomenon. A monk, through incredible control of his vocal cords, diaphragm, and the shape of his mouth, can produce a single, deep fundamental drone note, but simultaneously he selectively amplifies the harmonic overtones inherent in that note. The result is that you hear one steady, low pitch, but soaring above it, clear as a flute, comes a second, separate melody of high, ethereal whistling tones. It's as if one voice is creating a duet with itself. For the monks, this is not a musical performance, it is a form of meditation and a tool for transformation. Each harmonic is believed to correspond to a different dimension of existence or a specific energy center or chakra within the subtle body. The deliberate manipulation of these harmonics is thought to purify the environment, balance the listener's energy, and alter states of consciousness. From a physics perspective, what they are demonstrating is a masterful control of vibrational energy, shaping complex standing waves in the air. If such precise control can be achieved with the human voice to affect consciousness, the logical next question is, what level of control would be required to affect matter itself? The monk's mastery of overtones provides a tangible, observable example of how disciplined sound can be used to interact with invisible forces, bridging the gap between the spiritual and the physical in a way that feels almost like a laboratory demonstration of an ancient principle. This brings us directly to the tantalizing theory about the codex itself. If the legends of acoustic levitation and the practices of harmonic chanting are fragments of a larger whole, then the codex could be the ultimate reference manual for this science. Rather than containing complex machinery schematics, its enigmatic symbols and geometric diagrams might represent something far more elegant, sonic formulas. The intricate patterns could be visual representations of specific resonant frequencies, wave interference models, or harmonic ratios required to manipulate gravitational fields. Imagine a symbol not as a letter but as a spectrogram, a picture of a sound. The interlocking curves and dots could indicate the precise relationship between a fundamental frequency and its amplifying harmonics, the exact recipe for creating a standing wave that interacts with the fabric of space-time. This idea provides a stunning resolution to the puzzle of the codex's language. It wouldn't be a language to be read in a linear fashion, but a set of vibrational instructions to be executed. You wouldn't just read about anti-gravity, you would sing it into being or create it with precisely tuned instruments. The luminous metal of the plates takes on a new significance here. It could be a material with unique acoustic properties, a perfect resonator that itself vibrates in sympathy with these frequencies, acting as an amplifier or a stable reference point for the sonic technology. Consider the practical implications of such a system. The Vimanas described in the Vedas, with their roaring power and whirlwind propulsion, might not have been powered by a combustion engine, but by a massive, resonant sound chamber. The descriptions of heated, spinning mercury could be part of this process, a spinning vortex of liquid metal, could be an extremely efficient way to generate a stable, high-amplitude frequency when agitated by sonic energy, much like a singing bowl produces a rich tone when its rim is rubbed. The entire craft could have been designed as a giant acoustic resonator, its shape and materials carefully engineered to focus and direct these gravitational nullifying waves. This theory elegantly connects the spiritual discipline of sound with its technological application. It suggests that operating a Vimana wasn't just a matter of pushing levers. It may have required a crew of pilots who are also adept at vocalization or who could play a set of tuned crystal rods or metal plates, a literal performance to get the vehicle airborne. The Codex, then, would be the sheet music for this ultimate symphony of flight, containing the sacred mantras and harmonic sequences that could unlock the bonds of gravity and allow humanity to travel the skies in harmony with the universe's own vibrational nature. Mapping the precise location of the Codex is like trying to find a single, specific snowflake in a perpetual blizzard. The Himalayan range is a labyrinth of stone and ice spanning over 1,500 miles, containing some of the most remote and treacherous terrain on Earth. Yet, within this vastness, certain sites have emerged again and again in legend and expedition reports, glowing like waypoints on a treasure map drawn by history itself. Imagine a virtual map of this quest, its digital surface illuminated by a handful of key hotspots, each with its own compelling narrative and its own unique set of nearly insurmountable challenges. One of the most prominent markers on this map is the legendary city of Lhasa, the historic heart of Tibetan Buddhism. The logic here is compelling. Why hide the ultimate secret far from civilization when you could conceal it in plain sight, guarded by an entire culture? The focal point of this theory is the Jokhang Temple, the most sacred site in Tibet, a place of such profound spiritual energy that it's believed to be the axis of the world. Beneath its ancient halls, legends speak of a hidden, sealed chamber known only to the highest lamas, a library containing not just scriptures but relics of a lost age. The Codex, inscribed on its luminous plates, would be the greatest of these treasures, its otherworldly nature masked by the sanctity of its surroundings. The Potala Palace, a monumental fortress looming over the city, offers another tantalizing possibility. With its over 1,000 rooms, countless secret chapels, and labyrinthine passages descending deep into the bedrock, it is a hiding place of epic proportions. The logistical challenge, however, is absolute. Any search here is not a matter of geology, but of politics and profound cultural sensitivity. This isn't an untouched ruin. It is a living, breathing center of faith and Tibetan identity under constant observation. Gaining access to its deepest, most restricted areas would be virtually impossible for an outsider, making Lhasa a location that guards its secrets not with rock and ice, but with tradition and watchful eyes. Shifting our gaze from the spiritual capital to a kingdom literally frozen in time, we come to the caves of Mustang in Nepal. This remote region was for centuries a forbidden kingdom, its borders closed to the outside world until just a few decades ago. Carved into the towering, wind-scoured cliffs of its arid valleys are thousands of ancient human-made caves, their entrances staring out from dizzying heights. Many are simple dwellings, but others are far more mysterious. In 2007, explorers and archaeologists discovered a complex of caves near the village of Samzong that contained a network of tombs dating back over 1,500 years. Within these chambers, they found bodies with artifacts that suggested a sophisticated pre-Buddhist culture. But the most stunning discovery was yet to come, a cave system that was completely inaccessible from the ground, its entrance located high on a vertical cliff face. When researchers finally reached it using climbing equipment, they found a series of chambers containing exquisite, ancient Buddhist murals and a vast library of manuscripts. Yet, the real intrigue lies in the fact that many of these caves are multi-leveled, with upper chambers that remain unexplored and lower tunnels that appear to have been deliberately sealed with stone and mortar. The lore of Mustang speaks of these sealed portals leading to a vast subterranean network that runs beneath the entire range. For a seeker of the Codex, this is a prime candidate, a dry, high-altitude environment perfect for preservation, hidden in a region so isolated that it could have safeguarded a secret for millennia. The logistical challenge here is one of extreme climbing and archaeological patience, requiring teams to scale sheer cliffs and then carefully, respectfully, excavate passages that have been closed for 1,000 years or more. Then there is the ultimate sacred mountain, a peak so revered that no one has ever dared to climb it, Mount Kailash. In Hindu tradition, it is the abode of Lord Shiva. For Buddhists, it is the home of the Buddha Demchok, a symbol of supreme bliss. For the ancient Bon religion, it is the soul of the entire region. This is not a mountain, it is a living deity made of rock and ice. The legends surrounding Kailash are the most mystical of all. It is said to be not a solid mountain, but a gigantic natural mandala, a three-dimensional structure hiding a celestial palace within its core. Some esoteric texts describe it as a gateway or a stargate, a place where the boundaries between dimensions grow thin. The theory here is that the Codex isn't hidden on Kailash, but within it, accessible only through passages that are not physical, but energetic, or through hidden valleys that can only be perceived by those in an enlightened state. This aligns with the Bonpo and Buddhist legends of the Baal, or hidden lands, pocket dimensions, or parallel realities that exist alongside our own, their entrances concealed by powerful spiritual forces. The logistical challenge of searching Mount Kailash is therefore paradoxical. You cannot dig, you cannot climb, you cannot probe with radar. The only way to find the secret here is through spiritual practice, through the arduous 32-mile Kora or circumambulation of the mountain, a journey that is believed to purify a lifetime of karma. This makes Kailash the most profound and perplexing location on our map, a treasure that can only be found by those who have stopped looking for a physical object and have begun searching for a transformation of consciousness. Beyond these specific sites lies the most ambitious and speculative theory of all, that the true hiding place is not a single temple, cave, or mountain, but an entire world beneath our feet. The concept of a Himalayan subterranean network is a recurring theme in both ancient texts and modern speculative lore. The epics speak of a vast kingdom called Aghati, a civilization of advanced beings living in illuminated cities deep within the Earth's crust, connected by a global web of tunnels. Entrances to this network are said to be hidden in remote valleys across Tibet and Nepal, guarded by the elusive Shambhala sentinels. From a geological perspective, this isn't entirely far-fetched. The immense tectonic pressures that created the Himalayas would have also created massive fault lines, cavern systems, and voids within the continental plate. Some of these could be enormous, large enough to contain ecosystems isolated from the surface world for millions of years. The logistical challenge of finding an entrance to such a network is, of course, staggering. It would require scanning vast areas with ground-penetrating radar or LiDAR from drones, looking for anomalous thermal vents or magnetic irregularities that might hint at a hollow space deep below. Even if an entrance were found, the exploration would push the limits of human endurance, involving journeys into uncharted depths with unknown atmospheric conditions and potential geological hazards. This theory elevates the search from a treasure hunt to an expedition into the unknown, suggesting that the Codex is protected by the sheer, unimaginable scale and mystery of the planet itself, waiting in a sunless sea of rock for the day we develop the technology and the courage to descend into the world's deepest and most secret places. Let's pause for a moment and consider the staggering weight of this search, not the physical weight of the mountains, but the conceptual weight of the prize. What would it actually mean for humanity if a dusty, forgotten chamber in the Himalayas was opened, and there, resting on a stone pedestal, lay a set of luminous metallic plates containing the operational principles of anti-gravity? The discovery of the Codex wouldn't just be another archaeological headline. It would be an event horizon for our species, a single moment cleaving human history into a before and an after with consequences so profound they are almost impossible to fully grasp. The immediate effect would be the shattering of our current scientific paradigm. Our entire understanding of physics, engineering, and even our place in the cosmos would be instantly and irrevocably outdated. We would have in our hands proof that an ancient civilization, or perhaps even a non-human one, mastered a science we are only now beginning to theorize about. This wouldn't be incremental progress, it would be a quantum leap, handing us the keys to a kingdom of possibilities we've only ever dreamed of. The most immediate and universally beneficial application would be a total revolution in energy. Imagine a world no longer shackled by power lines, oil wells, or coal mines. The principles behind gravity control would almost certainly unlock our access to what is often called zero-point energy or vacuum energy, the latent, limitless power that exists in the very fabric of empty space itself. Our entire infrastructure could be transformed. Homes, vehicles, and entire cities could be powered by small, self-contained generators that tap into this fundamental field, rendering our current grids obsolete. The geopolitical landscape would be rewritten overnight. Wars fought over fossil fuel reserves would become a tragic relic of a more primitive age. The carbon emissions driving climate change would plummet, offering a genuine, technological solution to our planet's greatest environmental crisis. For developing nations, this would be the ultimate equalizer, providing access to cheap, abundant energy that could power education, industry, and healthcare, lifting billions out of poverty and closing the global wealth gap in a single generation. The very concept of an energy bill could vanish from our lives. Transportation would undergo a metamorphosis so complete it would feel like science fiction made real. The internal combustion engine, with its noise, pollution, and inefficiency, would join the steam engine in museums. Personal vehicles built on anti-gravity platforms would silently glide above roadways, rendering highways and traffic jams obsolete. The skies would fill with sleek, efficient craft traveling at incredible speeds, making a trip from New York to Tokyo a matter of an hour or two. The logistical and shipping industries would be reborn, with goods able to be moved anywhere on the planet almost instantly and with minimal cost. But the true frontier would open above us: space travel. If we can negate gravity, the single greatest cost and challenge of escaping Earth's pull vanishes. Rockets, with their explosive fuel and fragile designs, would become a quaint memory. We could build vast, comfortable ships that ascend gently into orbit, opening the solar system to colonization, resource gathering, and exploration. Mars, the moons of Jupiter, and beyond would become our new backyard, ending our confinement to this single, fragile planet and ensuring the long-term survival of our species. Yet, for every radiant vision of utopia, there exists a terrifying potential for dystopia. The same technology that could power a city could also power a weapon of unimaginable destruction. The ability to manipulate gravity is, by its very nature, the ability to manipulate the force that holds matter together. A weaponized application could create localized gravity wells intense enough to crush tanks into cubes or tear buildings apart at the molecular level. It could be used to create impenetrable shields or to hurl projectiles with the force of an asteroid impact. The balance of global power would be thrown into chaos. Which nation or corporation would control this knowledge? The frantic, high-stakes race to replicate and weaponize the Codex's principles could trigger a new kind of Cold War, one fought with technologies so advanced that our current nuclear arsenals would seem like primitive firecrackers in comparison. The very concept of national security would be rendered meaningless if any group could deploy a vehicle that is silent, invisible to radar, and capable of delivering a payload anywhere on Earth in minutes. The economic upheaval would be just as seismic. Entire global industries, aviation, automotive, oil and gas, shipping, and even parts of the construction and electricity sectors would collapse almost overnight. The stock markets would go into freefall as trillions of dollars of assets became worthless. The social turmoil caused by such rapid, widespread unemployment would be unprecedented, potentially leading to global instability and conflict even before the new technology could be deployed to help. This presents us with the ultimate ethical dilemma, a test of our collective maturity as a civilization. Do we possess the wisdom to handle such a power? The legend itself, with its guardians and its inaccessibility, seems to be predicated on the idea that we do not. The Codex has remained hidden, the stories suggest, precisely because humanity has not yet evolved beyond its tribal conflicts, its greed, and its short-sightedness. To hand the keys to the universe to a species still wrestling with these ancient demons could be an act of self-annihilation. The discovery would force upon us a choice we have never had to make so clearly. Will we use this knowledge to elevate ourselves, to heal our planet and reach for the stars, or will we use it to build better weapons, to dominate one another, and ultimately to destroy everything we have built? The Lost Anti-Gravity Codex of the Himalayas is therefore more than a relic, it is a mirror. Its potential discovery holds up a reflection of humanity itself, showing us both the brilliant, star-faring beings we could become and the self-destructive children we still are, forcing us to ask not just if we can find it, but if we truly deserve to. While the legends speak of a forgotten golden age, a small but determined group of modern researchers has refused to treat the Codex as mere myth, instead asking a profoundly practical question: can we build it ourselves? Operating on the fringes of established science, these pioneers have launched a quiet revolution, attempting to reverse engineer the principles of anti-gravity from the cryptic clues left in ancient texts, creating a fascinating bridge between esoteric lore and cutting-edge laboratory experiments. This is the world of fringe physics, where the roar of the Vimanas' Mercury engine is replaced by the hum of high-voltage transformers and the precise calculations of quantum field theory, all in a relentless pursuit to reclaim a lost science. One of the most persistent and controversial lines of inquiry in this field is known as electrogravitics. The core idea, first seriously proposed in the mid-20th century, is that gravity and electromagnetism are not two separate fundamental forces, but are deeply intertwined. If you can create a powerful enough electric field, the theory goes, you can influence the gravitational field around it. The most famous early experimenter in this area was an American inventor named Thomas Townsend Brown. In the 1920s, Brown discovered that when he charged a high-voltage capacitor to a very high potential, it would exhibit a tiny but measurable thrust in the direction of its positive pole. He called this effect the Biefeld-Brown effect, and he built disc-shaped devices he called gravitors that seemed to lift themselves when energized. To his eyes, he was witnessing electrical anti-gravity in action. Mainstream physics largely dismissed his work, attributing the motion to a more mundane phenomenon called ion wind, where charged particles streaming from one electrode to the other push against the air, creating thrust. Yet, for those captivated by the Vimana legends, Brown's work was a revelation. The description of his humming, disc-shaped gravitors, levitating when fed with high-voltage electricity, created an irresistible parallel to the ancient flying saucers described in the epics. The question became, was Brown merely observing ion wind, or had he accidentally tapped into the same underlying principle that the builders of the Vimanas had mastered? A principle where concentrated electrical energy could directly warp the local gravitational field. The quest did not end with Brown. In the decades that followed, other researchers began experimenting with even more exotic approaches, moving from static electricity to dynamic, high-frequency electromagnetic fields. A Russian physicist named Evgeny Podpletnov made international headlines in the 1990s with a claim that would seem straight out of the Codex itself. He reported that a spinning superconducting disk cooled by liquid nitrogen and levitated above powerful electromagnets could shield objects placed above it from gravity. According to his controversial papers, the rapidly spinning superconductor created a gravitational shielding effect, reducing the weight of objects above it by up to 2%. The scientific establishment was deeply skeptical, and attempts to replicate the experiment yielded mixed and often disputed results. The required apparatus was extremely complex and expensive, and the effect, if real, was frustratingly small. Yet the theoretical implications were staggering. Podkletnov's setup involved spinning a super-cooled disk, a concept that, to some, eerily echoed the ancient descriptions of heated, spinning mercury. Both involved a rotating medium, and both were purported to influence gravity. Could it be that the mercury described in the Samrangana Sutradhara was not the fuel, but a room-temperature superconductor or a medium for creating a specific plasma vortex that our science has yet to understand? While Podkletnov's work remains unverified, it inspired a new generation of physicists to take the idea seriously, leading to classified research programs within aerospace companies and defense departments, all exploring the potential link between rapidly spinning electromagnetic fields and the manipulation of inertia and gravity. Another compelling avenue of research explores the relationship between sound, structure, and gravity, directly channeling the legends of acoustic levitation. While we discussed the spiritual use of sound, modern material science has begun to catch up with the concept of using vibration to counteract gravity, not for massive stones, but for small objects in a laboratory setting. The technology is known as acoustic levitation. Using precisely tuned ultrasonic speakers, scientists can now create a complex standing wave of sound. At the points where the sound pressure is highest, known as nodes, tiny droplets of liquid or small solid particles can be trapped and held suspended in mid-air, completely contact-free. The object is essentially caged in a tiny, invisible prison of sonic force that pushes against gravity from all sides. While this is a far cry from lifting a Vimana, the principle is a stunning validation of the core idea that sound can be engineered to manipulate matter against the pull of the Earth. Researchers are now exploring whether these principles could be scaled up, perhaps by using infrasound or other resonant frequencies to interact with the molecular bonds within larger objects. This work gives a tantalizing scientific footing to the ancient stories of monks using chant to move stone blocks. It suggests that the codex, if it exists, might not contain equations for warping space-time, but rather the acoustic formulas for creating powerful, macro-scale standing waves that could render multi-ton objects weightless. When we step back and assess these modern replication attempts as a whole, a fascinating pattern of convergence emerges. The electrogravitic experiments, the spinning superconductor research, and the acoustic levitation studies, though seemingly disparate, all point toward a common theme. The key to influencing gravity may lie in creating a highly ordered, dynamic, and energetic state. Whether it's a high-voltage DC field, a rapidly spinning electromagnetic vortex, or a perfectly tuned standing sound wave, each method involves imposing a powerful, coherent pattern onto a local area of space. This aligns beautifully with the concept of sacred geometry we explored earlier. The ancients may have understood that specific, resonant patterns, whether etched on a metal plate, expressed in sound, or embodied in the rotating structure of an engine, could tap into the fundamental harmonics of the universe. The modern scientific approach tries to brute force this with electricity and magnets, while the ancient approach, as interpreted through the legends, suggests a more elegant fusion of material science and conscious intent. The tenuous link is not in the specific technology, but in the underlying principle of using resonant energy to create a localized ordering of the vacuum or space-time itself. The repeated failure to achieve a dramatic, undeniable anti-gravity effect in a lab might not mean the principle is wrong. It might simply mean we are missing a critical component, perhaps the geometric purity of the Vimanas design, the specific properties of a lost material, or even the meditative focus of the operator. The work of these modern pioneers, often mocked and underfunded, is therefore invaluable. They are the experimental bridge between our world and the world of the Codex, proving that the ideas within the legend are not entirely fanciful, but point toward a physics that is complex, subtle, and waiting just beyond the edge of our current understanding. Their struggle to replicate these alleged effects is a testament to the sheer sophistication of the knowledge we may have lost, and a humbling reminder that the greatest secrets of the universe rarely yield to a simple, linear approach. This brings us to perhaps the most profound and challenging dimension of the entire mystery, a perspective that shifts the search from the outer world of mountains and machines to the limitless inner landscape of the human mind. What if the ultimate key to understanding the Anti-Gravity Codex has nothing to do with engineering and everything to do with the state of the operator's consciousness? Across the esoteric traditions of the Himalayas, from the deepest tantric Buddhist practices to the ancient yogic paths of India, there exists a consistent and startling teaching. The material world is not fixed and solid, but is a malleable expression of a deeper, conscious reality. In this view, gravity is not merely a relentless physical force, but a perceptual constant that can be transcended when one's awareness shifts to a more fundamental level of existence. The Codex, then, is not a mechanical instruction manual, but a catalyst or a map designed to guide a prepared individual through this very shift in perception. This idea is anchored in the systematic exploration of consciousness detailed in yogic philosophy, particularly through the concept of the siddhis. These are not mythical superpowers in the comic book sense, but are described in texts like Patanjali's Yoga Sutras as natural, albeit rare, attainments that emerge from profound mastery over the mind and senses. One of the classic 8 major siddhis is explicitly named Laghima, which translates to becoming light or weightlessness. The texts explain that through intense meditation and the redirection of life force energy, or prana, an adept can make their body so light that it is unaffected by gravity. Another siddhi, Garima, is its opposite, the ability to become impossibly heavy. This reveals a sophisticated understanding that these are two sides of the same coin, the control of mass and its relationship to the gravitational field. The crucial distinction made again and again by the masters is that these abilities are merely side effects. They are signposts on the road to enlightenment, not the destination itself, and becoming attached to them is considered a dangerous distraction that can halt spiritual progress. This provides a powerful ethical framework for the legend. The Codex's power is not a toy for the ego, but a demonstration of a principle that can only be safely accessed by one who has moved beyond egoic desires. How could a state of mind possibly influence a physical force like gravity? Modern analogies from quantum physics can help bridge this conceptual gap, though they remain speculative. The observer effect in quantum mechanics demonstrates that the act of measurement or observation can influence the behavior of a particle. While this doesn't scale up to everyday objects, it establishes a precedent that consciousness is not a passive spectator but an active participant in shaping reality. The theory of the Codex takes this a radical step further. It proposes that the symbols and geometries inscribed on the plates are not meant to be read by the logical, analytical mind. Instead, they function as a form of visual mantra or a yantra, a focal point for deep meditation. By gazing upon these patterns with a mind that has been purified and concentrated through years of disciplined practice, a master could enter a state of unified awareness where the separation between the observer and the observed dissolves. In this state, the information within the Codex is not decoded intellectually. It is directly perceived and understood as a lived experience. The knowledge of anti-gravity becomes an intuitive reality, and the ability to manifest it is a natural extension of that realized state. The Codex doesn't contain a secret formula. It contains a trigger for a specific state of consciousness in which the secret is self-evident. This interpretation elegantly resolves the puzzle of why every attempt to seize the Codex by force has apparently failed. The Nazis, the Cold War intelligence agencies, and the treasure hunters were all approaching it with the wrong instrument. They brought maps, Geiger counters, and a mindset of conquest to a lock that requires a key made of silent awareness and self-mastery. The true guardians of the Codex, the enlightened sages in their remote monasteries, are not hiding a physical object out of spite or secrecy. They are embodying the very prerequisite for its understanding. Their lives of meditation are the ongoing research and development required to interface with this technology. A story is often told in Tibetan Buddhist circles about a great master who was asked if the legendary hidden lands were real. He replied, "For you, they are not. For me, they are as real as this room. It is a matter of your perception." This encapsulates the entire consciousness-based theory. The Codex and its power exist in a potential state, accessible only when the perceiver's consciousness vibrates at the correct frequency. This also reframes the purpose of the Vimanas described in the ancient epics. If the Codex requires an enlightened mind to activate, then the Vimana pilots, the Vimanathan, were not merely technicians. They were spiritual athletes, yogis who had mastered the siddhis. The intricate instructions for building the vehicle, with its mercury vortex engines and copper alloys, were not the source of its power but rather a supportive framework. The craft itself was a giant physical yantra, a technological mandala whose shape and materials were designed to amplify and stabilize the subtle energy field generated by the pilot's consciousness. The roaring sound described was not an engine combusting fuel, but the external manifestation of the internal rising of Kundalini energy, or the resonant frequency of the pilot's unified mind interacting with the fabric of space. The vehicle did not fly in spite of gravity. It flew because the pilot, in a state of laghima, was in harmony with a more fundamental law, and the Vimana, as an extension of his or her consciousness, simply reflected that state. The Codex, therefore, represents the ultimate synthesis of science and spirit. It is a technology that is inseparable from the enlightenment of its user, a perfect system where the evolution of consciousness is the prerequisite for the mastery of physics, ensuring that such an awesome capability could never fall into the hands of those who would use it for domination, but only to those who have achieved the wisdom to wield it for the benefit of all. Yet another perspective pushes the boundaries of our search even further, suggesting that we are not dealing with a lost human civilization at all, but with a legacy from beyond our world. This is the controversial extraterrestrial intervention theory, a framework that reinterprets the entire legend of the Anti-Gravity Codex not as a forgotten chapter in human history, but as a pivotal moment of contact with a far more advanced star-faring culture. According to this view, the sudden appearance of such sophisticated scientific concepts in ancient records isn't evidence of a prior golden age on Earth, but a sign of knowledge being gifted or perhaps even implanted by visitors from another world. The Himalayas, with their imposing, otherworldly landscape, become the perfect landing site and base of operations for such an advanced race, a place where they could interact with developing humanity while remaining secluded and protected. Proponents of this theory, often termed the ancient astronaut hypothesis, point to a persistent and global pattern in our oldest myths. Cultures across the globe, from the Sumerians to the Egyptians to the Maya, speak of gods or sky people who descended from the heavens, possessing incredible technology and wisdom, and who often took a direct hand in human affairs. In the context of the Himalayas, these figures are the devas of the Vedas and the enlightened beings of Shambhala. The ancient astronaut interpretation is starkly literal. These were not metaphorical deities or spiritual archetypes, but physical extraterrestrial beings. Their flying vehicles, the Vimanas, were not symbols of the mind but actual spacecraft, their descriptions of roaring power and celestial travel being humanity's best attempt to record the sight and sound of advanced propulsion technology. The mysterious mercury vortex engine, so baffling to modern researchers trying to fit it into a known historical context, is seen here as a clear reference to a matter-antimatter reactor or a plasma-based propulsion system, its principles so advanced that the only analogy available to the awestruck witnesses was the most enigmatic liquid metal they knew. This framework provides a compelling, if radical, explanation for the codex itself. The artifact's composition, a luminous, indestructible metal inscribed with a non-human script and complex schematics, fits the profile of a piece of advanced technology or a data storage device far better than it does a conventional ancient manuscript. The theory posits that the codex could be a teacher artifact deliberately left behind to accelerate human development. It might contain the fundamental principles of physics, not as discovered by human scientists, but as standard knowledge for a Type 2 or Type 3 civilization on the Kardashev scale. Its purpose would be to give humanity a shortcut, a jump start on the evolutionary ladder of technology. Alternatively, a darker interpretation suggests it could be a fragment of a crashed vehicle or a lost piece of equipment, its recovery and concealment by Himalayan sages being an act of preserving a dangerous and misunderstood power from a culture not yet ready to wield it. This view reframes the guardians from enlightened humans to the original extraterrestrials themselves, or their appointed human stewards tasked with keeping the secret until we mature as a species. The evidence cited for this connection often hinges on startling archaeological and textual anomalies. The detailed descriptions of aerial battles in the Mahabharata, complete with weapons that vaporize entire armies and cause hair and nails to fall out, symptoms eerily reminiscent of radiation poisoning, are presented not as poetic exaggeration, but as journalistic accounts of a terrifying technological conflict witnessed by ancient peoples. Furthermore, the theory draws parallels between the descriptions of the luminous beings associated with the codex and modern reports of extraterrestrial encounters, which frequently describe entities of light or beings with elongated features, similar to some depictions of Hindu devas or Buddhist bodhisattvas. The sheer isolation and altitude of the Himalayan plateau is also highlighted as a strategic choice for an off-world presence, offering natural seclusion, a defensible position, and potentially unique geological or energetic properties beneficial for their technology or biology. Of course, this theory is met with intense skepticism from mainstream academics and historians. Critics argue that it is a form of intellectual colonialism, robbing our ancestors of their own ingenuity and spiritual profundity by attributing their achievements to outside intervention. They contend that interpreting the rich, symbolic language of myth as literal, technical description is a fundamental category error, one that ignores the deep philosophical and psychological insights these cultures were articulating about the human condition. The response from ancient astronaut theorists, however, is that this skepticism is itself a form of narrow-mindedness, an unwillingness to consider that our history might be far more strange and wonderful than our textbooks allow. They ask a simple, provocative question: if an advanced extraterrestrial civilization did visit Earth in the remote past, how else would our ancestors have recorded the event, if not through the language and symbols available to them, framing the visitors as gods and their technology as divine magic? The legend of the Lost Anti-Gravity Codex, seen through this lens, becomes the ultimate cold case file, a piece of potential evidence in humanity's greatest unsolved mystery, pointing toward the stars and challenging us to consider that our search for the Codex might in fact be a search for our cosmic inheritance. And so we find ourselves at the end of this extraordinary journey, having traversed the thin, cold air of the highest peaks and ventured deep into the warm, flickering light of ancient sanctuaries. We have listened to the whispers of the Vedas, followed the determined footsteps of explorers and mystics, and peered into the complex equations of modern physics, all in pursuit of a single, shimmering idea: the Lost Anti-Gravity Codex of the Himalayas. This legend, in all its multifaceted brilliance, has proven to be far more than a simple treasure map. it is a profound and enduring symbol, a mirror held up to humanity's deepest yearnings. It represents our collective fascination with a forgotten golden age, our insatiable curiosity about the boundaries of science, and our timeless quest to recover a knowledge that feels somehow innate yet just beyond our grasp. The Codex challenges the very framework of our history, daring us to consider that the pinnacle of human achievement may not lie ahead of us in a shiny, technological future, but may be hidden behind us, buried under the ice and silence of a past we have yet to fully understand. Whether we interpret the Codex as a literal set of metallic plates, a spiritual allegory for enlightenment, or a fragment of extraterrestrial knowledge, its power remains undiminished. It forces us to confront the porous boundary between legend and reality, reminding us that every myth contains a seed of truth, and every scientific breakthrough was once considered impossible magic. The story's persistence across millennia, from the epic poets of ancient India to the clandestine files of Cold War intelligence agencies, speaks to something fundamental in the human spirit. It is a narrative that refuses to die because it answers a profound need. The need to believe that our world is still filled with wonder, that there are still great secrets waiting to be uncovered, and that we are capable of far more than our conventional history books would have us believe. The Codex is not just an object, it is an idea, and ideas have a gravity of their own, pulling generations of seekers into their orbit. This brings us to our final and perhaps most important reflection. After navigating this labyrinth of evidence and interpretation, we are left with one pivotal question that transcends the search itself. Is the ultimate value of this legend in the potential discovery of a physical artifact, a tangible codex that we could hold in our hands and whose principles we could engineer? Or does the real treasure lie not in the finding, but in the relentless pursuit? Is the Codex, in the end, a magnificent symbol for the eternal human drive to explore the unknown, to push beyond the limits of the known world, whether those limits are geographical, scientific, or spiritual? The very act of searching, of piecing together clues from ancient texts, of developing new technologies to scan hidden valleys, of contemplating the nature of consciousness and reality elevates us. It expands our imagination and propels our species forward. The dream of anti-gravity has already inspired groundbreaking physics. The quest for Shambhala has already led to profound cultural exchanges and a deeper appreciation for Eastern wisdom. In this light, the journey itself is the reward, a continuous process of becoming that is far more valuable than any single destination. So we leave this mystery exactly where it belongs, not solved, but alive, breathing, and waiting for the next curious mind to engage with it. The story of the Lost Anti-Gravity Codex is now yours to carry forward. What do you believe lies at the heart of this enigma? Do you think a team of archaeologists armed with the latest technology will one day unearth the luminous plates from a sealed Himalayan chamber? Or do you feel the truth is more subtle, hidden in the silent spaces between our thoughts, accessible only through a transformation of perception? Perhaps you have your own theory, a piece of the puzzle we haven't yet considered. The conversation does not end here, it is only just beginning. Share your thoughts and discoveries in the comments below, and if you're captivated by the world's great unsolved mysteries, be sure to subscribe and join us as we continue to explore the hidden corners of history, science, and human potential. The next great adventure is always